With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. Ukraine is reportedly planning to hold simultaneous presidential elections and a referendum on a proposed peace deal in spring of 2026 to legitimize a U.S.-brokered settlement with Russia, according to the Financial Times. The U.S. has allegedly made elections a condition for activating security guarantees, though Kyiv disputes aspects of the report. The referendum could address constitutional barriers to ceding Russian-occupied territory. Ukrainian officials maintain elections cannot occur without security guarantees and note constitutional limits during wartime. Challenges include displacement, occupation of territory, banned opposition parties, and organizing overseas voting for refugees. A 13-year-old boy has been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of knife possession following a double stabbing at a London school. Police say the suspect allegedly scaled a wall, sprayed a substance inside a classroom, stabbed a 13-year-old boy, then stabbed a 12-year-old before fleeing. He was later arrested near a mosque in northwest London, which police say appears coincidental. Counterterrorism Policing London is leading the investigation, but has not determined a motive. The victims are no longer in life-threatening condition, and the suspect is due in Westminster Youth Court. UK and EU regulators are seeking answers from X and XAI after reports that the Grok chatbot has been used to generate sexually explicit images, including outputs that appear to depict minors. UK regulator Ofcom said January 5th it had urgent contact with X and XAI to understand what steps they've taken to meet legal duties to protect UK users, and it will assess whether an investigation is warranted. An EU Commission spokesperson said officials are looking very seriously at Grok's spicy mode, calling any childlike sexual content illegal. Malaysia's regulator also announced a January 3rd probe into alleged harmful image manipulation on X. MP Rupert Lowe, who launched an independent inquiry into child rape grooming gangs in England, said evidence suggests countless British girls may have been trafficked to Pakistan as sex slaves. Testimony from survivors indicated abusers, described as mostly Pakistani Muslim men, attempted to take victims abroad and traffic them within the UK. Victims reported rape, torture, threats with weapons, and racial and religious abuse. Lowe called for a government investigation into missing girls in affected areas and alleged widespread institutional failure, accusing police, local authorities, and NHS workers of ignoring or covering up crimes. He said officials who knew and failed to act should face prosecution. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government has approved a bill allowing naval blockades against migrant vessels under specific conditions, including terrorism risks, health emergencies, or exceptional migratory pressure. Ships violating a blockade could face fines up to €50,000 and possible confiscation. The draft legislation, compatible with new EU asylum reforms, permits blockades lasting up to 6 months and expands grounds for expelling convicted foreigners. Meloni said the measures aim to strengthen border security and public safety, emphasizing that migrants must respect Italian law. Border Czar Tom Homan announced in a press conference in Minneapolis a significant federal drawdown is underway after a notable decrease in unlawful agitator activity.
And public safety is at risk. These QRFs respond to help these officers get off the X and get out of that situation. I asked the day when I got here, I want to know what the QRF's call-outs are, what their deployments are. I want to know every time a QRF is called out. The QRF deployments have dropped dramatically because we have less of that occurring, less of the agitator that cross that line. That is a good thing. That is a win for everybody, not just for the safety of law enforcement officers. It's a win for this community.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Right now, somewhere in Nigeria, there's a Christian family being persecuted. Those who are not killed are often forced to flee their homes. At Equipping the Persecuted, they're committed to reaching every affected area and help heal the deep physical and emotional wounds that have been inflicted upon them. But they can't help them without your support. So please visit equippingthepersecuted.org and donate today. Sign up for just $35 a month. It's a little over $1 a day, and you'll help rescue Christians who are suffering and provide security, medical care, food, shelter, and love. The situation is urgent, so I'm asking you to join in the next 10 minutes. It's a life of fear and danger for these Christians, but for just over $1 a day, you can change everything. Go online to equippingthepersecuted.org and make a difference in the life of a persecuted Christian. That's www.equippingthepersecuted.org.
Hi, my name's Michelle Tankey and I'm the volunteer manager at the Lost Dogs Home. We've got 145 incredible volunteers that help us with a wide range of activities, including helping out in the laundry, taking dogs for a walk, doing activities with our enrichment program, administration, gardening, you name it, they're helping us around the shelter. Whether it's blowing bubbles to entertain kittens waiting for adoptions or even taking a dog for a walk, it's such an incredible positive impact on the animals. Volunteers are so important and special to this shelter because they support us in caring for thousands of animals each year. The impact they have enables us to do far more for the animals than we would be able to. For example, we can get on top of the huge amount of laundry we have. So the volunteers allow us to clean thousands more blankets than we could. It's incredible the amount of gifts that we're given by the public. We're so grateful for it. So if we get some toys, we can give them directly to puppies straight away to play with. Or towels, we can take them to our vet hospital for them to use immediately. So it's a really important job to help staff with. I would say to someone who's interested in volunteering to please get in touch. We would love to hear from you. We have an application form on our website that you can fill in, so please just detail all your skills and experience you can offer the shelter and we'll be in touch when a suitable role comes up.
Surprisingly, the blueprint for transformation is woven into the United Nations Agenda 2030, ostensibly a vision for a better world.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I say again that taken together, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement provide humanity with a master plan for a sustainable way of life on this planet.
New York City, late September 2024, the setting for the United Nations Summit of the Future, a gathering of member nations to reinforce and accelerate Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The plan has a broad spectrum and is full of worthy ambition, but behind those deliberately bright and colourful boxes lies a darker theme, a shifting of influence and potentially power towards unelected world bodies. The strategy goes back well into the last century, and pressure is growing, because the goals are far behind targets set at the grand relaunching in 2015.
17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Our aim is clear, our mission is possible, and our destination is in our sight.
To end poverty and hunger, address inequality, protect our planet, and build a life of dignity for all.
It appears to be a noble and ambitious programme for a perfect world, and who could argue with those aspirations? But critics insist the goals are not what they seem. Alex Newman is a journalist and broadcaster who's been investigating the issue for 15 years. He has his own way of interpreting the rhetoric.
You have to learn to speak what I call UNEs. You have to know what the terms mean if you want to truly understand what is being discussed. When they talk about peacekeeping forces or the peacekeeping role of the United Nations, they're actually talking about the war-making capabilities of the United Nations. So you have this Orwellian doublespeak. When they talk about transparency, more often than not, they're talking about eliminating your privacy. Human rights is another very, very good example. They make very clear in this document that your rights can be restricted under the guise of public order or morality or whatever the case may be. And so they're saying, here's your rights, but by the way, they're not really rights. We can revoke them at any time. The UN is filled with contradictions like this. Like, for example, when they talk about gender equality, right? A normal person in the Western world thinks gender equality means a woman has a right to earn money, to own property, to have all the rights and privileges that a man would have. When you look at the individuals who lead this movement within the UN, you're talking about radical feminists. You're talking about people who are very interested in dissolving the nuclear family. As you dig into these goals, it's very clear we're dealing with something far more nefarious. Once you look past the marketing slogans, the kind of warm and fuzzy, we're going to end hunger, which again is just window dressing, you realize that this is actually a blank check for totalitarian global control.
Author and campaigner, the late Rosa Koire, called out the plan more than a decade ago.
It is the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world. But it's far more than that. It's a blueprint. It is the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all information, all energy, all means of production, and all human beings in the world.
Not the station for people who label truth as misinformation just because they don't like it.
For facts and truth.
Today's News Talk. The World Today.
Our mission at Pets of the Homeless is really simple, and that's to keep vulnerable people and their pets together when they're going through a tough time. Back in 2015, Pets of the Homeless started with a 20-kilo bag of dog food, made it into small packs, put it in a suitcase, and it was just me walking down the streets of Melbourne, one woman on a mission to make a difference. I would share the story on social media.
We've just hit 100,000 meals distributed today.
And the community really responded positively, and it just grew from there.
My name is Kent, and this is Hippo. She's everything to me. She's such a good girl. I got her at a time when I wasn't very stable. I'd come out of prison, I was homeless, but as soon as I got her, I just realized, oh my God, I can't let this dog go. And she's just my best friend. Hippo had a canine equivalent of an ACL injury. I knew there was something really desperately wrong. It was agonising seeing her suffering. My caseworker put me in touch with Pets of the Homeless, and Yvonne said that they could help, and I was just so overjoyed. I wouldn't have been able to get through that medical incident without their help. Like, it just would have been impossible.
That bond between us and our pet is very important. And when someone is going through a really tough time in their life, that bond becomes even more important. And that's what we're trying to protect at Pets of the Homeless.
Who's that?
My favourite quote is, I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realised I was somebody. My intention wasn't to actually start a charity. It was to help. It was just putting one foot in front of another, and that's how we got to where we are today. We're now in a warehouse. We have about 150 volunteers. We provide on average about 60 to 70,000 meals every single month. We have a network of about 73 community partner organisations that we work with. We've also taken in hundreds of pets into our foster care program, and we've just reached 2.5 million meals distributed.
In the time that I've been volunteering with Pets of the Homeless, I've seen the community grow, numbers of volunteers, pet food packing, got a brand new van, and we can reach more community pantries and reach more people. The community, whether it's the volunteers who are packing the food, who are foster caring, they've got so much love to give.
I think Pets of the Homeless gives people hope. There can be a bit of judgment for people who are homeless and have a dog, but the reality is those dogs have got love and support, and it's so wonderful that Pets of the Homeless are able to help. It really makes a big difference in actual lives. It's really important work.
To the people who have supported Pets of the Homeless over the last 10 years, thank you from the bottom of my heart. There's so many kind people out there, and I'm just grateful for all of them. The work that we need to do is so huge and the need is growing, and we can't do it without the support of our community.
Growing up, my father enjoyed a drink. It was just part of our culture. So you might have started drinking at 15 or 16. And so then it's just a slippery slope. As it affected me in the end, it was to the point where I couldn't even have money in my bank account because, I'd go to the pub or I'd go to the bottle-o. I started roofing in Sydney when I was about 20 years old. I had a crane come down on us. I jumped off the roof and the crane laid exactly down the line I was running. I could have ended up in a disability or life-threatening situation, and through that I developed PTSD. I medicated pretty heavily. I had a pretty pessimistic outlook on life. The glass was always half empty or whatever it was. You don't realise those things are impacting you so much. It's really hard to walk through the world. Depression and those negative feelings lead to thoughts that, you'd be better off not here. Suicidal thoughts are a terrible thing, You look at what you've given your family, you look at what you've taken away from your family. Dealing with that for extended periods of time and not talking to people about it is something that's probably taken a toll on me and my family that I didn't realise. My drinking got to a point where I was drinking in the mornings and, I had a job and my boss told me, it wasn't good enough, and I was so lucky that, my boss took me to an AA meeting that night. When you walk into AA, it says on the wall, admit that you can't do this yourself anymore. The second thing is admit that you need God in your life. Having that written there and it just saying, try and turn to the Lord, I thought, well, rightio, now that's my chance. I met Robbie pretty early on. I sort of reached out to him and said, where do I go? And Robbie had been coming to the Salvation Army Church and he said, look, come with me. And we spent a lot of Sundays together. That was pivotal in what I'm doing now. I believe that I was brought here for a reason. I came into the church and I was lucky. There's just so many lovely people here. It's the community as well as the church. One of the members prayed for me. And I think it was in nearly that time that my PTSD was healed and I felt like I belonged in a way. Walking close to the Lord has helped me use my heart more through worshipping the Lord on my own and connecting and drawing him close enough so that he could literally heal me. But when I start to fathom how much healing, glory, there's enough for everyone because that's how it's written, it's never ending. One day after church, I was at home, had an opportunity to see the kids, and my littlest boy was there and he was 8. And he looked at me in a way that he'd never looked at me before in his whole life. That's because I was sort of talking to him differently. I was really lucky to have that moment and to see what could happen if I just keep doing the right things and keep walking with the light. That was something that was pretty amazing. I'm going through a bit of a hard season now, with work and things. I think all I can do is move forward positively. But I really look forward to a future where I can see my kids and my boys grow up. So I really look forward to these next years to live a calm, peaceful life.
What is Australia's deadliest predator? The one that hits with more than 30 Gs of force. Strikes in under a second. Leaves catastrophic injury in its wake. You won't hear it, you won't see it, not until it's too late. Australia's deadliest predator isn't found in the wild. It's on our roads. Speeding is the killer.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome to, oops, what have we got there? Something's going on there. There we are. There's our guest, the Honourable, not the Honorary, Dr. Gary Johns. Sorry about the late start. A couple of things going on. Can't help bad luck. It's a Friday on the Gold Coast. It's 4:21, which is all of Queensland, but it's pelting down here. A very heavy rain band has been going since last night. I had a slip outside. I looked like I was surfing down the main stretch. By the way, in New South Wales and Victoria, it's 5:20. In London, it's almost 6 in the morning. But the good thing is, the magnificent thing is, it's Friday. And I don't know if it's just me, as I'm getting a little bit older, not much denial set in, but Fridays or weekends are looking more important to me. I have to ask Gary about that. Does he look forward to weekends like I do too? And then I end up coming back into work. But it's all in the mind, isn't it? Now, this week the Prime Minister delivered the Closing the Gap report in its 18th year. The annual progress report is a commitment made since 2008, when the then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd pledged to reduce the disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians within a generation. The 2025 report highlighted that while some areas are improving, only 4 of 19 key targets are currently on track. Is this, think about it, is this an absolute failure, despite annual spending, wait for it, of more than $30 billion on First Nations people? The Honourable Dr Gary Johns was member of the Australian House of Representatives from 1987 to 1996, holding the Queensland seat of Petrie for the Australian Labor Party. That's when they were good. I even voted for the ALP in those days. Don't tell my dad, he'll fall over. Actually, he did fall over. And a lovely funeral too. Gary served as Special Minister of State and Assistant Industrial Relations Minister. He's also served on the Productivity Commission, and from 2017 to 2022 was head of the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission. He's an author of numerous papers and books and publications. His latest book is The Burden of Culture. In 2023, Gary was chairman of Recognise a Better Way, a group arguing the no case regarding the Albanese government's proposal for an Indigenous voice to Parliament. He then formed the research organisation Close the Gap Research, of which he is chairman. First of all, I have to introduce, he's no longer the honorary, he's the Honourable Dr Gary Johns, as he reminded me. Did I get it right?
You did indeed, Mike. Thank you, and my apologies for being late, but Brisbane is just locked up at the moment. We've got a major problem out there.
Well, we need more roads and better roads. And when I see the ads on YouTube and TV popping up that we're doing these things for you, the roads are still terrible. And I suppose as you bring in more people and increase the population of various vicinities around Queensland, if you haven't got the roads for it, you're going to have a bottleneck. But just think, if you were driving to the Goldie or Gold Coast, or if you were on the Gold Coast driving to Brisbane on the M1, I'd have to see you for breakfast. It's terrible. The Closing the Gap framework, it's an admirable mission, but the question is it working?
No, and more importantly, it can't. The framework is pathetic. We're really saying because there's a disparity between some Aboriginal people and all other Australians, all we have to do is give those poorer Aborigines money or run government programs and all will be well. And now after 18 years, we find that it's not well and it will never be well because we refuse to acknowledge that two things are happening. That collective Aboriginal self-determination only advantages the people at the top, that is, the PhDs and the Pro Vice Chancellors and the academics and all the rest of it. but it cruels the chances of the people at the bottom, that is, those Aboriginal people who are sitting mainly in rural and remote areas. And this is the second element. They are the least able. They have been locked out of the modern economy. They're not attending school. They barely read, write, and speak English. So as the Prime Minister gets up each year, they're actually condemning about 20% of Aboriginal people. They are the policy settings in this area are a disgrace. I think some politicians understand it. I think some policy makers understand it, but they are willfully continuing on this charade that is locking about 20% of Aboriginal people out of the economy and the modern world. The consequences are dire. Children dying young, women being bashed, men and women going to jail early. Mike, it's almost a mystery to me. I've been at this for 30 years. Why the hell they keep making these speeches and continuing on this pathway of self-determination? I don't know. It's a cruel thing.
Yeah, I'm from an area called it's Mildura in Victoria, and when I grew up, we had small Aboriginal settlements, and I have to tell you, they were treated appallingly, given a lot of money, and it was terrible. And what I learned, and my wife actually took an interest. She's from a place called Shepparton, so same sort of thing, and the ignorance that she conveyed to me from the population and from government, and she said they were just basically plain ignorant. I mean, they all wanted to seem to do good, but the amount of money they were spending and stuff was just a complete waste of time. Even then, without being nasty, they burned their houses down, and they didn't want to go the direction that which we found us white folk wanted them to go. Can you tell me, because I see all these do-gooders and the government wanting to do good, and I see state governments didn't give a rat's about the voice and stuff like that. I see everything just moving along the way that a group of people, such as government of those, are telling the Indigenous people what to do. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I can't see a whole lot of difference except the amount of money and a few platitudes. I can't see a whole lot of difference between now and what happened, when I grew up. And I think, to me, I think that the virtuous signalling from government or from these white folk, I think is part of the problem, and I don't know how to fix it. But forever and a day, government has always been giving money to the Indigenous people, and you're right. The role of self-determination. I mean, in Hawaii, when I lived there, they were going to give there was this. Yes, we'll give the island, and they couldn't wait for it. Give it back to the Indigenous Hawaiians. It never went anywhere, and so how do we fix it? I mean, having lived in an area that was very prominent. I mean, it was just terrible around Dareton and stuff like that, which is in New South Wales, but close to Mildura. It was just appalling what they did, and the poor buggers. They'd be drunk in streets and stuff. It's not how we should. I mean, we were doing it wrong then, and I still think we're doing it wrong now.
Yeah. All right. I think you have to acknowledge that in the Milduras and Sheppartons, but in more remote or in the remote areas, we have a collapsed society. All right. About half of Aboriginal children born in the north are not only outside wedlock, even informally, if you like, father unknown. Right? There's just a collapse in society. 20% of Aboriginal men have gone to jail. In the north, fewer than 10% of kids attend school often enough to pass. It's called an attendance level. So they're not going to school. girls are getting pregnant young. Men and now more women are getting into sufficient trouble with the law to have to be jailed, and they have to be jailed because most of the crimes are violent crimes. So let's accept that we have a collapsed society. But it's not true for 80% of Aboriginal people who have escaped that society. They are into the modern open society. They're going to school, colleges, universities, and they're getting lots of jobs. Unfortunately, too many getting jobs in the public service, in designated positions, meaning that only Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders can apply. So it's not particularly efficient, but at least they're paying taxes and getting on with life. But the mindset has changed since about 1967, and that mindset was such that we gave up on the notion that you had to come in. You had to adapt to the new world. It wasn't a white man's world, it was a modern world. So once that assumption was swept aside and we began this game of self-determination, we asked people who with no skills or very few skills adaptable to the modern world to build a new Jerusalem. You had to stay out there on collective title with few skills, very little English, less than your grandparents, and make a go of it. And that's been the message throughout what we call the settler states, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, who were wealthy enough and insightful enough to recognise there were Aboriginal peoples and we wanted to care for them. But this awful ideology of self-determination started to seep through, mainly from the communists in the 1960s. That captured the heights of policy making, and a lot of Aboriginal people are doing well today because they escaped that thinking. They were free of that thinking. Their kids came through under the explicit policy of integration. So all of the sort of great Aboriginal, part Aboriginal thinkers today were the product of integration, and they've turned it back and said, well, our people need self-determination, and that's why we can't get the last 20% in.
So how do we do it? How do we do it? I mean, we're spending more than 30 billion.
Okay, let me go straight to that. What's happened is that about 50-60% of Australia is under native title. And in years to come, the battle won't be over winning native title, it'll be over compensation for impinging on native title. So I'm saying to whoever will listen, when those monies go from state governments to native title holders, as much as possible should be tied up into trust for the education of the children. The only way out of this is to get as many kids into boarding school and off those properties and away from that foul culture as we can. They will go in too late. They'll go in as early teens or whatever, but you can't take children as young ones. That's too much. But we have to change the conversation to say you literally have to live a regular life. You have to be trained for 10 years like everyone else in order to cope in this society. So it's a long-term plan. There is a stream of money that will going through to native title holders, which is in the areas that you need, which is in remote areas. That's the solution, Mike. And there are a lot of good people who run boarding schools and smaller schools attached to remote communities who are dedicated. They're pretty much like the old Christian missionaries, and often they are, who are prepared to spend years to take children from these awful communities and train them, stick with them long enough so they get a chance to come in just as their grandparents did 2 generations ago.
Tell me about your organisation, Close the Gap Research.
Yeah, well, we're a small band of people scattered around Australia who are prepared to put in some basic research, like, for instance, there are a lot of organisations that look after Aboriginal people who come out of jail, for instance, and we say which ones are doing the best in terms of reducing recidivism, that is, the propensity to return to jail. And we find that governments don't even ask. The government will ask of a bloke who's come out of jail and goes through a 3-month course, did you enjoy the course? Well, of course he did. He's out of jail and he's getting 3 meals a day and playing touch footy. The question is, what are the chances of that person returning to jail? Governments won't ask. So we're just saying, can you only fund things that work? And in this case, is a nice simple test of what works. How long did you stay out of jail? And so we write, I'd call it very simple papers. We wrote a survey of schools that provide scholarships for Aboriginal kids. And we say, do you know it's an Aboriginal kid? Did the kid win it on merit or on the basis of need? Do you know whether they got through school? And the survey results were very disappointing. Schools often don't ask. They just want someone who identifies as an Aboriginal kid and is probably very distantly related to get a scholarship, so they have a little icon at school to say, look, we've got our Aboriginal kid. But it didn't close the gap. The kid was going to pass anyway. So we always keep that focus on need, not race. The only thing that will close the gap is you focus on someone in need, and your intervention is of the type that might help them come in.
Do you ever have conversations with the current Labor, any government? You make a lot of sense. Surely, and the reason I'm saying that is if they spent more than 30 billion, I would imagine it was the same, or a lot of other years or close to it, if not more. And it just seems perhaps they could just walk out into a strong wind and throw that into the air. It would probably do just as good. Do you ever talk to them and say, look, fellas, you're not doing it properly?
Yes, I've been talking to the new government in Queensland for some time about this. I think initially they were receptive, but they're finding it too hard. See, what happens is that you'll talk to a minister, and they'll say, yes, that's we understand, Gary. And then they'll talk to public servants. And the public servants at the most senior level are too scared to overcome that middle level Aboriginal public servant who basically says, look, leave it alone. We own this. You don't understand it. We have cultural insights, whatever that means. And by the way, if you tell us what to think, we'll claim that we feel culturally unsafe. There's this appalling game going on whereby those who got their university degree, got into public service positions, in designated positions, own it, and they do not like the likes of me and my Aboriginal colleagues telling them that they're getting it very, very wrong. So, Mike, we're in there, we're trying. I can't even open a door to a Labor government, but, So I'm going to keep working on the Queensland government, and I'll try to get to the Northern Territory government. I think they know they're wrong. I think they know what they're doing is harmful. But sometimes it just takes a lot of conversations for people to recognise and to change their views.
I wonder if when they scratch their head, if they get splinters. Truly. We have a few sayings in the bush. I'm not going to do that because it's a family show. But jeepers, mate. Anyway, look, it was a pleasure chatting with you, Gary, again. Thank you for turning up, and I appreciate your time. They have flying cars coming out shortly, so you'll be fine after they get here. Can you imagine, though, how dangerous that will be?
Yeah. There are losers in every revolution, Mike.
It'll be no longer an airbag, it'll be a parachute. Gary, thank you so much for your time. Have a great weekend too, and we'll talk again soon. This is The World Today. Coming up next, Tony Nikolic.
Makers are facing more travel.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world.
keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, the world today.
And welcome back to the world today. You can tell it's a Friday. Already I need a scotch. Actually, I always need a scotch, so forget that. Charlotte, don't even send me that email again. You'll see it where the sun, or you won't see it because we where the sun don't shine about drinking scotch. Now in Australia, I'll talk to Tony about that. We should get him onto you. In Australia, family law operates on the principle of the best interest of the child, not parental gender, ensuring children have a right to a meaningful relationship with both parents. Historical bias, as my voice breaks against fathers, is often cited. Key issues for men include navigating custody, residence, ensuring enforcement of access, managing child support, and addressing concerns regarding potential biases in family violence allegations. Tony Nikolic is the General Manager at AFL Solicitors, an experienced lawyer and criminologist committed to social justice. He offers pro bono legal work and champions civil and human rights. Tony has expertise in whistleblower protections, which as we progress down the track, you can bet your bottom dollar that we're going to need Tony Nikolic to protect us from releasing sensitive information, aka the truth. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Mike.
I left out that part where you said you're the best in Australia, so I thought you could do that yourself.
Yeah, I thought maybe when I have a few scotches, mate, that might get a bit better.
You shouting, I'll be there. Not hear that.
Single malt, only single malt, Mike.
That's okay. It's okay. I don't care about the price. Sorry, we have to be serious here because it's a very serious problem. Men's rights and family law. Now, I don't know a whole lot about it, except what you read in the papers and you see on TV and stuff like that. How serious is it? How infringed are blokes?
Well, the family law, the objectives, Mike, I've got a master's in family law dispute resolution as well, and I practice in family law quite well, one of the major areas. But the whole idea of family law is obviously to be fair and equitable across the whole spectrum, meaning gender neutral. Unfortunately, in practice, and I don't say this, putting blame anywhere, but there's certainly something going on because men are obviously getting the short end of the stick. Now, in saying that, I just want to make it very clear. I've represented both males and females, and it depends who gets custody, but the overwhelming, and I say overwhelming majority, is the mothers get custody. They get significant amounts of money, and child support affects the father. And in many instances, the preconditions for that to occur are quite dubious, and that is where we are right now.
Is that because and I'll tell you why I'm mentioning this, is that because the perception is that guys are big, burly and wife beaters, but I'll tell you the anomaly I saw, actually was in the one of the local newspapers here on the Gold Coast, which we have our daily newspaper, comes out once a year. No, but it had these, these terrible domestic violence people, and there were 4 images, and there was a guy and a guy and a guy and a female. And I thought, oh, hello, that's a bit interesting. She must be giving the husband maybe a bit of a biff behind the ear and a few others. Is it common? We actually lost you, Tony. We just lost our power then. We're going to try and get you back here. I presume I'm still on the air at the moment. Yeah, we just lost it because we're having a very bad storm here, and internet went out just like that. So,
yeah, I got it the other day.
Yeah, it's NBN. Kevin Rudd he discovered NBN on the back of a napkin after a few whiskeys. See, don't drink. But I'm just thinking though, out of those 4 people that were the terrible domestic violent people, is there a percentage of women that are that have DVs against them, and would that go against the grain of which again I'm just guessing here, but what I read and see, would that be going against the grain that courts think that the guy first of all is the beater and that the wife is the one receiving it?
Look, it's a great question. Predominantly, it's dominated by males. The domestic violence charges and restraining orders. And remember, when you get a restraining order or an apprehended domestic violence order, it depends on how they're terming it and what state you're in. The fact that you have it doesn't mean you've actually perpetuated one, because you can say, well, I'm going to consent to the restraining order or the domestic violence order, but I'm going to make no admissions. But therein lies the statistical trap, Michael. So when you start seeing statistics, these overwhelming graphs demonstrate that males are well and truly dominating. That doesn't mean that they did, because many males, and I know this from my criminal practice, and as many other criminal lawyers will also tell you, they do it just to get rid of it because of the stress. So they say, look, if there's no admissions, I'm not going to get charged. The option is either fight it, or I can just take this, leave it, and we're not going to argue. I'm not going to spend tens of thousands of dollars defending something. So you can do what they call by consent without admission, but then statistically that can get used down the track when you start seeing media, bureaucracy, politicians talking about domestic violence statistics. Technically, it comes out as saying, well, this person sought to resolve it, you see. So down the track, it gives you a misconception of what's really occurring on the ground. In my practice, I know a lot of them, we actually win a lot of those cases, because by the time evidence is tested, you'll end up finding out that a lot of what was said in there is either embellished or made up. And that's not saying that they all are. I just want that to be very clear, because some are very serious and they should all be treated very seriously. I just want to make that very clear. But by the same token, the statistical analysis, so when you look at it from a criminological point, the statistics will show something very different. So, for instance, 26% of domestic violence assault matters were withdrawn, here in New South Wales, from the New South Wales Bureau of Crime Statistics. 8% resulted in absolutely no proven charges whatsoever. So that tells you exactly what I'm saying is the case. So when that then is transferred into the family jurisdiction, well, that then turns into a whole new ballgame, because the family law jurisdiction is significantly lower threshold, in the sense that all the way through until you actually get to your hearing, which could be 2.5, 3 years down the track, is presuming that something may have occurred. Doesn't mean it did. The allegation's totally different. So And in that time, the father is potentially not seeing the kids or having to see them under contact. So it's a very significant issue we need to address.
What are the main issues for guys, for men, blokes in say in these situations? I mean, and again, I probably going back to my original thoughts is that there would be a fair amount of bias involved.
There is, and that is where it's at. So basically, we call it the silver bullet. All you have to do is one party. Usually, it's unfortunately it is the the female side alleges domestic violence against the male, and it then turns into a long, arduous journey for a male to prove that he's worthy enough to be a father. Now, I can give you one example. There was a case, and this is a real case, I won't identify it, but the week prior, they had been actually in Surfers Paradise, I believe, somewhere around there, and they had been on a beautiful family trip. You can imagine the photos that were coming from that family trip and, kids jumping on dad and, mum and dad hugging, all the good stuff. And what ended up happening after that, I think it was the next week, the father works out that the wife had been having an affair with someone, and he approaches her, not in a bad way, just says, hey, can you tell me, is this true? And ends up that was the case. But the most important issue about that is she then went and filed in the family courts, and at the same time went and filed for an apprehended domestic violence order. That took about 8-9 months for the investigation. We represented him in that, and that didn't go anywhere, didn't even make it to court. In that time, the family law proceedings were running in parallel, so he still hasn't seen his children because he's deemed to be a danger. And straight after that was dropped, a sexual allegation against the children was made. And that went on for many more months again. In this time, he cannot see his children because now we have federal agencies investigating this father. Now, I can tell you this father is a loving father, never did anything wrong in the sense of, significant violence or anything like that. Perhaps yelling at the child for, or setting a boundary may have been about the worst he got. And I don't know if any other parent in Australia hasn't done that, but anyway. But the issue was that by now it's almost 2 years, 2.5 years. He hasn't seen his kids because of the prohibitions that are in there. Were there any implications on the mother for doing so? No. And that is the issue. Now this father is having to remediate. So they're some of the crux issues. The other issues, Mike, are significant, is when that does occur, men have no services. You don't have, tell me, have you ever heard of a men's refuge? Have you heard of a men's, bunkhouse where they can go to? They're just not there. So we're working on these in the background, Mike, myself with a couple other people as to how and what support services. And I touch on that from a real case that I had here. Very similar circumstances where the allegation was of this different case altogether. And he had nowhere to go. And I rang him a week later and I said, oh, look, I need you to come in and we just got to sign some documents. And have you got access to your computer? He goes, Tony, I've been living in my car for the last week and I've got nowhere else to go. I've got nowhere to sleep. I've got no family here. So that's the reality of what's happening out there, Mike. And men have been dumped. So we have all these different institutions and bodies, and I'm not saying take them away from the women because they're also needed. And if you hear what I'm saying, it's more of a gender neutral thing, but you can't be gender neutral if one party's the only one getting all the referrals and the support. Men need the support.
What about both cases? I mean, the guy living in the car and the other fellow that had first the DV, keep away, then the sexual investigation on him with his kiddies. What about their mental health? I mean, to sleep in a car for a week would mean that your mental health is taking a real battering.
It is, Mike. The misconception here is this, is because you're a man, you're tough, you can slog it out. Well, How do you do that? You don't have a kitchen, you don't have a toilet, you don't have a bathroom, you don't have your wife, you don't have your kids. Life as you knew it is no longer there. You now lose employment. And they go to the brink of suicide. The suicide rates for males are astronomical. No one's paying attention to it. And when you do pay attention, they say, well, it's patriarchy and you deserve it because, you guys have dominated. Well, that's not the case. And I know so many women out there, loving, caring mothers and women who are actually saying it's wrong. It's wrong when a woman makes up allegations. And there are cases of false allegations. I can tell you, I've had a case where messages were left on a telephone saying to the husband, that's the wife to the husband, saying, if you don't effing come home now, I'm going to drive these kids into an effing river and you're never going to see them again. Well, let me tell you something. The court's seen that as an emotional response to someone who's taking care of the kids, and that wasn't one message. There was months and many months of those sorts of messages coming out. And so really there was a lot of fear for these young children. Well, in some cases, the courts actually gave them custody at certain points or parental responsibility, and the father fought and got him back. But that's the difference. A guy doesn't even have to do that. A guy can, under hearsay, the wife can say, well, he said this to me with no evidence, and he won't see him and potentially never see them again. That is the difference. And this is what drives dads to the brink of absolute despair, because they're with their kids. They love, they nurture their kids. They get them ready for school. And in one day, that's all torn away. They don't even have a home anymore. They've got to live out of the back of a car. Their mental health goes deteriorating. And you know what happens then? They go to the court and the court says, see, he can't look after himself.
That is just, it's actually heartbreaking, very sad, isn't it? We've got probably 2 minutes left. Is there any organisation that will help these guys, these males, men going through this garbage? And besides yourself, are there other legal options for I know that you do a pro bono and stuff and all that, and you're going to go to heaven because you're the number one lawyer in Australia, according to you.
Single malt.
Single malt, that's right. It's a great heaven. I'm going to go with you. But I'm just thinking, though, there has to be other. What about government services to help the guys, or is it like the government via the police? And I know this for a fact that via the police, they're going to side with the woman first up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So it puts the guys on the back foot. Just quickly, is there any other organisation, government or whatever, that someone could go to instead of sleeping in a car? And I understand that the mental health is really taking a battering, but are there options available to them? I know they're few and far between, but there has to be some good organisations. I mean, even your local church.
Well, you can, but again, they're desperation points because under Australia's economy right now, the Pacific peso, you've also got a lot of the elderly, a lot of the mental health going into the churches, people who can't afford food. So the burden of social services is being spread. But to put very generally in your question, the basic issue is no, we don't even have a minister for men. We have no accommodations for men. There are groups out there, and we are in the process of developing. There's some really good podcasters out there. We've got Jared Purcell, Broken Fathers podcast. We've got Parent Beyond Breakup, and we are now in the process of setting up further issues, obviously through myself and others. We're going to get together and get this going. The issue with respect to men is very serious. It's not heard, it's silent, and it is a revolution against fatherhood, and it needs to change because strong families need strong fathers.
I need to talk to you off air in the next week or so, because we have some. We're making progress into restarting TNT again, but not as TNT, but very similar. So you mentioned some great names, and I think we're going to do things a bit differently, and we will invite these people on to have their own shows, because I think it's very important. I think mental health and to feel like that you're needed and that people respect you and love you and that your life has not stopped because of terrible things happening to you. I think we need to be able to get that word out too. Tony, if somebody...
Can I just say, and I do apologise, that is certainly the very, very poignant point that you made there. In the middle of this are the children, and we keep forgetting that when you tear a father away, that child hurts, and it hurts for a long, and potentially for a very, very long time. And they keep saying in the best interest of the child. Well, separating a family and cleaving the father out of that family and telling that son or that daughter, you can never see your dad again, that's not in the best interest. There might be the serious point, we take that for, but not every dad. Unfortunately, most dads are being treated like this.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. Look, it was great chatting with you as I'm trying to get my news organised. The guy, he's waving his arms at me, but he'll be on in a second. Tony Nikolic, Australia and the world's greatest lawyer. Somebody wants to find out more about you. I owe me 4 bottles. Wants to find out more about you. How do they do that?
It's aflsolicitors.com.au or admin, ADMIN, at aflsolicitors.com.au. Pop us an email, give us a call. Everything's there. You see what we do. We're happy to help out. Thank you, Mike.
You will go to heaven way before, not way before me. I won't get there.
No.
I mean, unless you want to go before
a little bit longer.
I have to make a few detours, I'm sure, where there are rocks. Tony Nikolic, thank you so much for your time. This is The World Today.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. 5 Democratic senators have urged President Trump to use upcoming talks reviewing the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement to address concerns about Chinese electric vehicles entering North America through Canada and Mexico, Reuters reported. In a letter to the U.S. Trade Representative's office, they warn that Chinese cars pose economic and national security risks. Chinese EVs are largely blocked from the U.S. market due to steep tariffs, now totaling 127.5% under Trump. Canada recently struck a preliminary deal with Beijing, allowing up to 49,000 Chinese EVs at reduced tariffs in exchange for lower Chinese tariffs on Canadian agricultural exports. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage warned of a Brexit betrayal, saying Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government is preparing major legislation to realign UK regulations and standards with the EU as part of a reset with Brussels. The Times reported the bill could arrive as soon as next month, with ministers arguing alignment would reduce paperwork for businesses trading in both markets. Critics say it could shift dispute resolution to EU institutions like the European Court of Justice, while the UK would have no vote on the rules. The BBC said alignment targets farm and food exports, electricity, and emissions trading. Starmer's office said the approach could add nearly £9 billion by 2040. Nigel Farage announced London prosecutor Layla Cunningham as Reform UK's London leader and 2027 mayoral candidate, pitching a tough, broken window-style crackdown on crime to challenge Mayor Sadiq Khan. Cunningham, senior Crown prosecutor who resigned to campaign, cited personal experiences of crime affecting her family and described gathering evidence herself after police said resources were limited, earning her the vigilante mum label. She promised visible policing, zero tolerance, and real consequences, and said she would set priorities including knife crime, drugs, robbery, shoplifting, and sexual violence. She also criticized Khan's handling of policing and said she would push to pursue organized sexual abuse cases and replace Met Commissioner Mark Rowley. Debate at the European Parliament focused this week on state violence in Minneapolis and the rule of law in the United States, while critics argue the EU has avoided addressing allegations that the European Commission interfered in multiple European elections through enforcement of the Digital Services Act. A U.S. House Judiciary Committee report claims the EU pressured tech companies to censor lawful speech, including during elections in several countries. The European Parliament declined to debate the report's findings. Critics say the DSA threatens free expression and democratic processes, while supporters argue it combats disinformation and enforces platform accountability. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the world is moving toward a multipolar or polycentric global order, but warned the transition will require struggle. Speaking to RT on Diplomatic Workers' Day, she said new centers of power will emerge based on economic, geopolitical, and civilizational strengths. Zakharova cautioned that some nations may attempt to reassert exceptionalism and unipolar dominance, arguing that whoever is stronger is right could gain momentum. She said equality under international law was briefly advanced in the 20th century following World War II, but emphasized that such principles had to be fought for and must be defended again. Fox News senior strategic analyst retired General Jack Keane analyzed President Trump's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about Iran.
And that is to finally take Iran off the board as the destabilizing adversary in the region, and with the potential for finally, after 46 years, to have some stability and enduring peace in the region. That is the historic opportunity, and I would imagine both of them would agree with that premise.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Port Macquarie is a beautiful destination. Many people come here for their holidays. Lots of people retire here, but it also seems to be a place where many young families have come and really make it their community. Wednesday mornings we have our Community Connect space, which all started when we built a relationship with Second Bite from Coles and also Oz Harvest, and we were getting food and we were thinking, how do we connect with the community? We knew isolation and loneliness was a big thing, and the cost of living has certainly affected so many people. But how could we use this as a way of connecting people together and connect them in relationship with us? We have just amazing volunteers who just care and love and just take an interest in people. They want to take part in what they can, so in a sense give back.
My name is Lee Miller and I've been volunteering for 21 years. On Wednesday mornings we sort through all of this food and put it out for the community members, and then we open at 9:30. Most people are grateful for it, and a lovely lot of people say thank you on the way out and even bless us, so that's just wonderful. It really helped me probably more than the people that were helped, because I was at a loose end in my life and I needed people in my life.
I think the heart of the mission is about relationship. We want to see people come to know Jesus. We want to see people experience life and the hope and the freedom that comes from him. And we know that starts by relationship. It's not just by putting on a program, but it's about how do we connect with people and connect with their heart and be able to give them honour and respect. Our hope is that it is a ministry place where lives get lasting change. It's not just a momentary nice feeling, but there is actually deep and lasting impact in people's lives as they move forward.
Everyone has a reason. It could be good grub, your liquid gold, or more golden years. For someone you know, for parents you don't, or because 1 in 3 of us will need blood in our lifetime. For every reason to become a donor, there's an even bigger reason: life.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome to the Protagonists. It's a Friday. I can tell it's a Friday. Mondays are great. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, anything goes. but a very important topic. We covered this subject of data centres recently, but we have some guests today who can provide their perspective, because in some sense they are competitors to some of these mega projects that our governments are pushing blindly ahead with. Worse still, many are cloaked in secrecy and have huge ramifications for Australians, given their size, their requirements, and the risk and investment sums involved. For example, I think it's called the Mummery Road Data Centre, proposed for Sydney's West, would be one of the biggest built anywhere in the world. Now, can we do this on renewable energy? Of course not. And given the environmental impacts, should it be done? These centres require a huge and uninterrupted supply of electricity and water to keep them running and cool. Data centres currently use about 3.5 billion litres of water per year in Sydney alone. Sydney Water is predicting that their demand will jump to 25% by 2035, and at the moment it's 1%. The source of that water is contentious, and data centre developers aren't required to show projections, which is absolutely bizarre, on how much water they will use. Sydney Water is exploring options to supply new data centres in Western Sydney with recycled water, which would require the building of new recycled water plants, pipes, and associated infrastructure. Think about it. It's becoming an absolute schmozzle already. Right now, at least 89 data centres are drawing directly from the public drinking water supply. Now let's look at power. The majority of data centres rely on power purchase agreements, which are called PPAs, to meet net zero targets. While PPAs enable data centres to buy wind or solar power, the actual energy used often comes from fossil fuels. Shock horror. I just heard Chris Bowen fall over. As wind or solar energy is intermittent and often generated far from the facility. As Malcolm Roberts would say, Senator Malcolm Roberts, it's unreliable. And it's not what data centres want. They want reliability. It's not clear how this power will be supplied if coal plants continue to be decommissioned, or how domestic power bills will be affected. Though some data centres, for example in the US, have pushed prices, now wait for it, pushed prices 267% higher for local residents. What are the implications, not only for city consumers, but other productive activities that drive our economy? Who is looking at these issues? Our panel today is, we do have Ross floating around the car parks, and we're looking for a signal for his phone, so hopefully we can talk to Ross Johns shortly. Our panel today is Andrew Wiedemann, AM, from Grain Producers Australia, and Paul Vallejo, ex-NASA aerospace and nuclear engineer. And we have Ross Johns, as I said, running around the car park. Hopefully he won't get run over. But
Ross is trying to join in.
I hear him in the background. This is a kumbaya moment, I would imagine. First of all, I want to ask you, Andrew, your thoughts on these massive projects that they're doing at the moment. The projects, they're going to obliterate communities. And if what's happening to the farming communities or the rural landscape across Australia and the environmental impact of all these massive projects, what's your views? How do you think Australia will look in a few years? And tell us your thoughts on these projects, from data centres to the wind farms, solar farms, and so on.
Yeah, so look, Ross has just sat down next to me actually, because it looks like he can't get the camera to work. But I'll have first crack at that question, Mike. So, look, in terms of Victoria's long-term view of what the government's trying to do to us, 70% of the arable land area here in Victoria is to be covered essentially with either battery solar farms or wind farms and then transmission lines. So we farm on a very finite resource. There's only 1.5% of the arable area in Australia is in Victoria. And at the moment, these essentially these wind projects are heavily subsidised for energy distribution, and it's close to 40%.
We seem to have some trouble there. It's, as I said, it is a Friday. I go to Paul. Paul, what do you think? We need your microphone turned on too.
Everything is a trade-off. When it comes to what things you're trading off, you got to make sure that what you're doing is going to be better than the alternative. And obviously, if you have an excess of water and an excess of power, well, then having data centers can make sense. But we have an excess of neither, and we've already got a power crisis before we go into this the data centers. So this is continued bad government policy, continued bad regulation. It's just getting worse. We've got to turn this around before it's too late.
Yes, we do. We actually have, if you could see the control panel, I have a guy here, and he's pulling out his nose hairs at the moment because we're trying to get the thing to work. We do have activity from Mildura once again, and Andrew Wiedemann. Andrew, we really can't have too many in your frame because it's a thin frame, and we know that Ross is not. So what we might do is keep you on at the moment. Can you you were talking about the basically what it's going to do to to Australia. What's your thoughts? And then you dropped out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the cost of all of this is going to be borne by the Australian taxpayer. 40% of the 40% of what's been generated and taken out by essentially international multinational companies. Of the top 30 here in Australia at the moment, there's 24 of them that are actually foreign owned, and so all of that money is essentially every taxpayer's funding other countries, particularly China, with their own taxes and money to essentially try and stabilise the power grid here in Australia at the moment. And that's only going to grow. So it's a Ponzi scheme of the highest order, because at some particular stage, and we think we reflect back on the wool industry with essentially a floor price scheme. This is no different with the energy scheme. And at some point in time, the tap will turn off, and the taxpayers will be left with a very big bag to fill. We're already filling that bag, as we're seeing a 24% increase this year in energy costs here in Australia. That's predicted. And on top of that, of course, the cost of living is going to keep going up. Inflation goes up, creates interest rate rises, and all of a sudden we're in a world of pain. So I think, in a nutshell, Mike, that's part of the profile here in Victoria and potentially Australia at the moment.
Paul, they need reliable energy and an enormous amount of water. I see that China is now two things which I found interesting. China were contemplating putting them on the bottom of the ocean to keep them cool. The next thing they're looking at is also putting up these data centers in outer space. You have some experience in that. Can you tell us your thoughts first of all?
Well, cooling things in outer space is already difficult. What would make sense? Someone who would have a comparative advantage in data centers would be a country like Iceland or Norway, where they have an abundance of excess power due to their geothermal or to their hydropower, and then also a naturally cool environment. So, in terms of which countries have a competitive advantage, which would make sense for them to invest in that kind of thing, that would be an example. Again, Australia doesn't have an excess of either. We have a lot of work to do to lower our cost of living, lower our cost of energy already without adding this extra burden. But it seems like another government rort or public-private partnership that leaves the taxpayer and the people behind. The people making the approvals are going to make money, the companies are going to make money, and the Australian consumer and taxpayer is going to be left holding the bag once again. We really are run. Last time I think I was on the program, I said it's like we're being run by children, but it's worse than that. That's actually being too kind.
Yep, it's truly like musical chairs at the moment. I was going to ask you also what about because Chris Bowen, Paul, and you're an American that's lived here for some time now, but you're an engineer and you understand that we need to have constant power. Um, I can only see the only way to power these data centers with that consistent power so that it's not going to drop out. The only way I can see it is with either coal powered or nuclear. Now, either one of those is going to go against the mantra or the agenda for the federal government and many of the state governments. What would you say to them? Because they're very, very enthusiastic in getting these monstrosities built, which they say are needed to have all the digital access from consumers and government and all sorts of contractors. What would you say to them if they said to you, "No, we're going to use the renewables and they're going to power us along"? Would you tell them that they've got to be dreaming?
I think what they're probably dreaming is of big, subsidy checks. It doesn't make any sense in any fashion. So first of all, the word renewables doesn't make any sense. There's no such thing as a windmill that after its end of life and it collapses down, that it sprouts new windmills. It's not renewable. Solar panels aren't renewable. There's vast amounts of dirty mining, dirty jobs that go along with solar panels that make them not at all neither a clean nor renewable source of energy. But worse than that, there's the intermittency. So what you need is a constant base load power. And the other thing the power grid, the coal and nuclear drives turbines, and that has a very consistent frequency that matches all your electronics. The wind and solar have a lot of intermittent spiky power, and the more you try to integrate that into the grid, the more you're going to disturb electronics. You're going to have blackouts, and also fine electronics get damaged when you have spiky power. So there are all kinds of ways. There's the cost problems, the reliability problems, the fact that it's not renewable. We're mowing over the tops of our mountains and putting windmills in whale migration zones, things that no green would ever allow the damage if it was a fossil fuel, but somehow remain silent when it comes to this disastrous so-called renewable plan.
I can understand why governments are very enthusiastic into getting these data centers, because it provides an enormous amount of revenue. I don't know about work, but at least revenue is there. They're going to fall flat on their face. What about the communities we have at the moment? They will also suffer. And we heard from Andrew Wiedemann before too that we have a problem within the. Sorry, I'm just looking at 10,000 things going on here. We have a problem also within the farming community because it's just not going to work. What do you say to that?
Who's that question to?
Okay, I'll come back to you again. Sorry about that. The farming community are also worried about these major projects, as with the suburbs around Sydney, for example, other residential areas. They're afraid that these data centres are going to create all sorts of upheaval for the local communities. And one I could see is that when they build them, those that are nearby, and I've been just from some of the cases in the US, that there seems to be a sort of a hum. It's a very bad experience. What do you say to that?
I've been to a couple of energy forums where these farmers have brought their concerns forward, and the noise of the windmills carries for long ways. They also, so first of all, a lot of times we're going to have their these windmills somewhere nearby, but the decibel level carries for some of the farmers they can't sleep at night. Also, the windmills, they fleck off little bits of plastic. They also kill birds and disturb local wildlife. So this is a real burden on their way of life and on their communities. And a lot of times it impacts people. They have no choice. They're being negatively impacted without any say in the matter. So I can understand why the farming communities would be up in arms. Absolutely.
So where to from here? What do we do? Because the amount invested already has been, I would imagine, in the squillions. The amount they can receive in revenue from these taxes and so forth would be in the squillions. What do we do?
Yeah, I think the first thing you want to start with, if you're going to act like an adult in the room, don't worry a bit too much about sunk costs. What's done is done. Our best way forward is, first of all, reliability. The most important thing you need is a reliable energy grid. So, what do we have that actually can create that? We have an abundance of coal and also nuclear and in the form of uranium and thorium. We can get our coal production and power generation back up to speed while we develop nuclear programs that would provide a reliable baseload power indefinitely. We have enough reserves in both uranium and thorium and coal to last hundreds and thousands of years. So reliable domestic supply. Also bring down the cost of power so that we can reshore Australian manufacturing, get our cost of living down, get our jobs back. Another thing actually that would be really important to do is harden our grid for solar storms. That's something that last week, I don't know if you saw anything about the sunspot cluster that came by. Though, we are still vulnerable to disruptions to our power grid from solar storms. And that's something that many people don't think about or talk about, but could be a huge issue in the future.
I think we have some sort of activity now.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Sorry about this.
That's right. It was like a Chinese Josh house. It was getting pretty wild. I understand, though, you're in Mildura and you've just been to a funeral.
Well, we've been at a funeral and we're travelling back. We're actually in Oyen on the way home, and we thought, this would be a strong signal point, but it's not. So we're doing our level best. I know Ross is still trying to link on. So, but fire a question at us, Mike. Sorry.
There we go. Yeah, no, I know Oyen very well, being an ex-Mildura boy myself. Yeah, and it's I left as soon as I could, by the way. So my dad always said it was the last stop before hell. But he lived there all his life, so it can't be too bad. We're talking about these data centres and the major projects, the infrastructure they require, the costs they require. And governments are very enthusiastic about this and the rare earth minerals which you're finding in the Wimmera and stuff. Yeah. What would you tell government at the moment?
Well, look, I mean, where these data centres are, from our perspective, if you need to build them, then you need to build the energy component right next to them. So rather than trying to build up transmission lines and power lines and increase the fire risk here, particularly in Victoria, that's certainly been the push that we've been taking and making sure that we're not trying to increase all of the potential risks out here, particularly in the environment that we're farming in, Mike. So, as you know, it's a dry and arid climate, and we're a high-risk fire zone, and there's already been fires this year, again, lit by power lines. So, just increasing that's definitely going to increase our potential for greater risk for fires. I think that, look, a lot of people are really can understand that AI and obviously, mobile connections that we're talking about are a part of the future and current situation here, particularly in Australia. But the other problem we have, and this is a national issue, is that a lot of these particular turbines and things that are being built and transmission line is going to interrupt the radio frequency. In particular, we have an issue with our current radar that's here in Victoria. It's disturbance there, so you get these indiscriminate pictures on a satellite map. But on top of that, farmers in Queensland are really concerned about this It's an issue where they're talking about having 5 kilometre buffer zones, particularly from high infrastructure areas where they're wanting to run autonomous vehicles on the farm, that it could potentially create a safety issue because of the intermittent signals. Now, just like we're experiencing right here tonight, that is a real issue for farmers going forward, because autonomous things are going to be a part of the future. They're already here and now, and so again, that's just going to increase costs through insurance, etc.
Paul, you're because of your background, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely electromagnetic interference is a big part of engineering and spacecraft, and there are all kinds of signals that you have to block out if you're trying to focus on making sure you get the signals that you want. So I can, definitely with data centers, transmission lines, and all the other forms of radio signals and things like that we have to manage depending on what it is we're trying to do. So I mean, it makes sense that this would be an additional form of essentially electromagnetic, you could call it pollution, in certain sensitive areas.
Paul, when they build a data center, I mean, and I'm going to simplify it because it's not just that, but if you were to explain it to someone who's quite naive about it, you could probably say it's a giant warehouse full of computers, and they all operate within certain parameters, and that's how it basically works. And so they understand, okay, it's a big shed with a billion computers in there. Now, if they need an increase in water to keep it cool, then we have that problem being is that if they keep it cool, they're going to have to use a lot of water. Now, the water will be coming from the local area reservoirs or rivers nearby, which they're sharing with the community, probably farmers and other industry. But they said we're going to, we may use recycled water. So we probably will go and build some big desal plants on the coast. Desal plant, I think, takes about 7 years, if I'm correct. So whatever time it is, if it's 5, 7 or 10 years it take to commission the desal plant to work, what happens in that time period? Because government wants these things built very quickly. We haven't got the infrastructure to keep them cool. We haven't got the energy to keep them on. So what happens to that? Say for example, Western Sydney. We've got this big data centre being built. They get the local water, so therefore, and we look at Australia at the moment. There's a fair bit of drought all over the place, although you wouldn't believe it on the Gold Coast today. But there's you wouldn't believe it in today. Sorry, Andrew. We're just talking. So if there's a gap between building the data centre and there's a 5 to 10 year gap before the recycled water plants come online, become commissioned, where do they get the water from? The impact on the community and other industry nearby will be affected. What do they do? Do they just tell the locals, suck it up?
Yeah, it seems like you're being very kind in terms of you're trying to figure out what makes sense, what would make this work, and is there a realistic plan? It doesn't seem to me that there's any realistic reason to do this in the first place, given the constraints we already have. I mean, like you said, there's all kinds of infrastructure that has to go into place, but we don't even have good energy infrastructure and low costs to begin with, and then we're adding this as an additional load. Clearly, this is being driven by some other subsidy or policy into areas where it doesn't make sense for the Australian people. So one of the questions I would have is, what are the politicians really following if it's not what's good for the Australian people? This makes no sense. It just doesn't.
We're still working. It's just Ross has joined us now with a.
Thank you.
Outside the Victoria Hotel in Oyun.
That is correct.
And I would imagine you've called there just to do some libations to get over the stress on TV.
No, we called here to try and get some internet service, and that's been struggling. But anyway, that's another thing about Australia. We should have better service.
You just come on, so I appreciate it very much. What's your views on these data centres and the major projects that are happening right across Australia? How do you think, for example, these will affect communities and those in the bush?
Well, certainly we need some really good data centres. AI is coming, and the US is building nuclear power plants directly with data centres. Australia's that far behind in terms of how we're structuring this change and this adaptation for the future. We've got a government policy that's really underperforming. Intermittent power is not going to be the solution for the future, and we've got to get a lot better energy supply system, a lot more reliable, and we've got to generate a lot more power close to where it's being used.
So, Paul, Donald Trump has made a big move this week with the EPA. This will have an impact on our climate policies. Could you just go through what he's done and how it will affect not only the US, but it's going to affect globally?
Yeah, I think what he is doing, I think it was just today, is revoking the endangerment clause. This was something that Obama signed into law, saying that carbon dioxide and other forms of greenhouse gases were pollutants and a danger to the global environment because they're greenhouse gases and are causing climate change. And this had a lot of downstream effects on a lot of companies in terms of reporting requirements and mandates. And Donald Trump is revoking this law. Now, that, in my mind, is a great thing because these mandates, these costs, they're a suicide pact for Western economies and the people. For instance, China built 100 new coal-fired power plants just last year. We ship twice the energy we need in the form of thermal coal to Asia to get burnt and put into the same atmosphere that we all use and breathe. The idea that we sign up to this net zero pact or the Endangerment Act, it ties our hands. It bankrupts our industry. It makes our people poor. We're clearly there's a number of things wrong with it. One is the whole carbon is a danger narrative is incorrect, and we could go into that. There's also the sensitivity of the climate to carbon. That's a whole argument in and of itself. But we're being driven into these narratives that carbon is dangerous. It's our fault. We have to do something about it, even though other people are just adding to the carbon emissions. And at some point, people should realize that the game is being rigged against them. It doesn't make any sense for us to ship out twice the energy we need to Asia to be burned in the same atmosphere, and we can't use our own cheap, reliable source of energy. Something is wrong.
Paul, just keep you for one more second on this bit. What does the Australian government do if they don't do anything? What's the outcome for Australia if they don't do anything?
That's a question for me.
Yes.
If the Australian government doesn't do, if they're on the current course, what we're going to have is increasing blackouts, increasing energy grid instability, increasing cost of living crisis, and we're also building this net zero rollout where we're chopping down mountains, putting down windmills in whale migration zones, building tens of thousands of kilometers of transmission line. And of course, those transmission lines, they have to chop down trees and maintain them. And if the wind blows and it hits the transmission lines and causes a bushfire, well, that will have been caused by climate change too. So we're on a course to self-sabotage on the current path, and the Australian people will suffer until we kind of wake up and throw these bums out.
Andrew, you heard what Paul was saying, that things are basically going against what the Australian government is pushing for the renewables and net zero and all that sort of stuff. You've probably met him once or twice, Bowen. Do you think Bowen? Do you think he'll have a heart attack if he had to do an about turn? Now, if they have to do an about turn, and if they, just going back to the data centres, for example, if they don't have the energy and water to power these data centres, they're not going to happen. So if to make sure these data centres continue and they are built and that the government receives the revenue, a part of the revenue from these data centres, the government would have to do, including the Victorian government, which is probably one of your favourite, they're going to have to do an about turn. Now, I don't know the Victorian government that well, although I do see that they have been making some fairly large donations to the CFMEU, but only between $15 and $30 billion. How do you think that will go to say to the Premier of Victoria, Prime Minister of Australia, the Environment Minister of Australia, and a few others, sorry, fellas, we've got to do an about turn now. We're going to have nuclear power and we're going to start building coal-fired power stations. Do you think that will ever happen? And if they don't, though, you heard what Paul said, we're going to be left behind and we're basically stuffed, so nothing happens at all.
Yeah, well, look, that's right. I mean, we're really concerned, obviously, as a nation, I think, about where we are with Bowen. I mean, I don't think Bowen has got too many ideas about really how to make this happen, because he's tried the political route, and that's just being met with absolute angst from farmers and the general population in general, because they're starting to have to pay for it. But look, the energy mix is the critical part, Mike, and I feel that the long-term future has definitely got a bit of nuclear in it. But in the short term, obviously gas is something here in Victoria and Australia. We're a country that's full of energy resources and we export them to everywhere else in the world and don't utilise them ourselves. So I think we've definitely got to go back and have a look at the coal-fired power stations. We've certainly seen information this week at a conference I ran earlier this week in Victoria, where that is still the cheapest form of energy, regardless of all the rhetoric from government. Because remember, that when the government puts up its figures, that's subsidised, as I said earlier in the program, by 40%. And that's why it looks cheaper on paper. But the reality is, paper is what Bowen works to. We work in the reality of life out here. And we're certainly not against climate change, because the climate's been changing ever since I was born and farmed with. And there's no 2 years the same in farming. And the reality is that I think a lot of people are hanging their hat on it. And, here in Oyen, this last fortnight had the highest recorded temperature. But we know ourselves that when we were kids that the temperatures were much higher then than they are to some degree now. And we've seen that happen. So let's... we need a dose of reality and people to be more centre in their thinking around this. And, like what Paul's saying, is spot on in terms of that overall picture. So, yeah, I just feel that's being lost in the rhetoric. And people run around and the sky's falling in and they'll be calling us climate denialists and all that sort of stuff. But I can't stress more. Like I as a farmer, Ross as a farmer, we both work in a changing climate and we adapt to it. And this year, Australian farmers have produced a record crop, a national crop, on what I would say in a lot of areas, minimal rainfall. So we're learning to adapt to that process. And that's what the rest of Australia needs to do. And if we really are serious about climate change in the rest of the world, well, let's just stop sending coal overseas and gas, and all of a sudden, problem solved.
Can I come in on that?
Sorry, Paul.
Oh, if I can come in on that for a second. Yeah, I completely agree. The only thing the Greens recycle well is predictions of catastrophe. Every bunch of years, the Maldives is supposed to go underwater. Every bunch of years, the Arctic ice is supposed to disappear. The idea that the climate was completely stable until we came along and screwed it up is just complete nonsense. 10,000 years ago, you could walk to Tasmania or Papua New Guinea. We had the Roman warm period. During some of the ice retreats up in Greenland, we found out not that long ago that in 1000 AD they could farm barley in Greenland. It's still too cold to farm barley in Greenland now. We had the medieval warm period, and then the time where they were skating on the Thames, that cold period about 300 years ago. So, I mean, climate change is the norm. No one denies that climate change happens. This idea that this is new is a narrative-driven nonsense in order to drive us away from reliable power. Whoever spun this narrative is choking our economy and forcing us not to use our own resources.
Well, Patrick Moore, he was one of the guys that started Greenpeace, and at the end said, "Nah, it's all rubbish." And his mantra or philosophy is welcome the warmth and fear the cold. And you know about this more than I would, but I think about every 400 years or thereabouts, the sun goes to sleep a bit, and we have a mini ice age. Things get very cold, but yet. And that's been happening, for millions of years. But we find, though, that the Greens and those wanting to save the planet sort of don't like to look at history. And history, if you're a geologist, you know that we go through these cycles. And as for the weather, what was it, 48 or 49? I mean, I don't know, because I think, Ross, you're from the cooler part of Victoria. You're a bit of a wimp. But those having lived in Mildura and played cricket in Oyun, and truly you wear long whites and have a bat and pads, and it's about 50. And truly it was just normal. And nowadays, once it hits 30, you're heading for a climate catastrophe. You're all going to boil to death. So I think.
Well, what concerns me is that the data has been rebased, and they've rebased data all around the world, but the Bureau of Meteorology has done that quite consistently, and that's pretty unreasonable. I think that's got to be thoroughly evaluated, and I suspect that the data that was recorded may have been accurate, and what they've done is just drop the historical data to prove their point that climate change and we're really heating up. I think if we look at those numbers accurately in their raw form, it will prove that that is not the case. But equally, the hypocrisy of the Australian government, who's exporting 1 million tonnes of coal per day to keep the energy prices cheap in China and India and Japan, is absurd, plus all the gas we're exporting. Why is our government, that should be looking after Australians, looking after the interests of other countries and global multinationals? They should be looking after the interests of Australians, both financially and in terms of energy supply. And we should have the cheapest energy in the world. Australia has a big supply. We supply a lot of energy to other countries, and we should have the cheapest energy in the world, and we deserve it, and we should.
Ross, can you tell me your concerns about the other mega projects or rare earth projects that are planned in your part of the world?
Well, that's pretty easy. The projects that are planned in the Wimmera require a huge amount of water, and water is in very short supply, overcommitted, and I think haven't been properly evaluated. The government's fast-tracking these processes to approval. We should be looking at our water resources and have a 100-year plan and how we're going to supply the cities, how we're going to supply the community, how we're going to supply agriculture, and how we can build the supply into the mining requirements. I think no one's done that evaluation, and we need a proper, thorough 100-year evaluation on water supply right across Australia.
Paul, what do you think?
I mean, that makes sense. Rare earth minerals are definitely a hot topic these days, with China controlling most of the supply. A lot of other Western governments are trying to figure out where we're going to try to source these things. But if Australia is going to get involved, yeah, absolutely. We have to make sure that it's something that is good for something that we can handle and is good for our local communities. So that makes sense.
And And Andrew, what do you think too?
Oh, look, I'm 100% agree with Ross in terms of the water. The infrastructure here that we've paid for to pipe the water has allowed us to farm. And when you look at the amount of water that's going to be used, is that the best use of it? Shouldn't it be producing food? I mean, that's, when you look at the 7 gigalitres of water that they're going to take just to suppress dust and try and salvage some rare earth minerals out of the finite sands in the Wimmera Plains, we're a prime agricultural food producing state and country, and we need to be protecting that from these. There are other areas that can be mined. We're not against mining per se. It's just that it shouldn't be happening where we've got a very finite resource. 1.5% of the arable area here in Victoria, and as I said earlier in the program, 70% of that covered in transmission lines, batteries and wind turbines, and on top of that we're going to start mining it as well. I mean, there'll be nothing left here to produce food. The food bowl is being potentially wrecked for not just now, for the long term. These projects have got a long time to run, and we've been and shown that this rehabilitation to the standard of producing food in our state is going to be diminished considerably by these mining projects. On top of that, the water resource. I mean, we've had a change in our farming scope. We've seen in the last 30 years, 180 million sheep reduced to 67 million sheep. So the other 110 million sheep area is now being cropped, and that has reduced runoff because we don't have compaction on the soils. The compaction on the soils allows for the water to accumulate and run off into the catchments. All those catchment areas have become the highest crop and grain producing regions right across Australia. I mean, we saw this year in WA in particular, 27 million tonne crop. They're talking a 30 million tonne crop next year if they get more rainfall because of the area they've now exposed. And we're seeing that here in Victoria. We've had a record production in terms of the area that's been sown again because people are going out of livestock. So that's reducing the amount of potential catchment of water, because we're actually utilising the water where it falls. And so that's been a big change in the landscape in the last 20 years, 30 years really, Mike, and we're starting to see that. As Ross said, we need a 100-year water plan to happen because this is obviously going to be a diminishing resource, and we're going to have more population out here requiring it, and higher value foods required to feed those people. So it's an amazing scenario that governments are not looking any further than the next cycle of election.
Yeah, I'll ask Paul first, and then get both you and Ross's opinion. We just had because we look at the opposition in Victoria. I think she's just out of primary school. I'm not too sure, the leader of the opposition now. And she has a bit of a leg up. I don't know if I can say that, but because of the CFMEU, there is a slight opening of the door. Otherwise, they would have no chance at all. And if you look at the federal opposition under Susan Ley, and she's now resigned, and she's finishing up in politics to give clear air to Angus Taylor. You need a good opposition, but I'm looking at at Angus's second in command here, Senator Jane Hume, which is interesting. It's a senator. She's an ex-Turnbull follower, basically, or a supporter when Turnbull's around, and he was so much into these renewables. If we have an opposition that's not much different to the federal or state government, except they're a little more wet behind the ears, it doesn't augur well for the future, does it?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We have that same problem in the United States, where we have what some people call a uniparty, that the Republicans and Democrats on some key issues were not much better than each other. And all throughout the Western world, we seem to have a kind of a uniparty, let's say globalist elite that seems to kind of try to control the commanding heights of the political landscape. In Australia, there are differences between Liberal and Labor, but on a number of key issues, neither one of them seem to be representing the the Australian people. Especially on energy policy, especially on cost of living. I think, as far as Susan Ley goes, good riddance. Angus Taylor, not much better from everything that I can tell. Our local representative here in Warringah in Manly, James Griffiths, is also a net zero advocate, completely useless from a policy point of view. I'm hoping that we get some up and comers. Whether it be good policy from better policy from the Nationals, from One Nation, or there's an upcoming party, Reform Australia, that I have hopes for as well.
Yeah. Also, Paul, there, I was just thinking what is it with our politicians? Are they stupid? Because we know that this is it's fanciful to think that, as you said, in such a short space of time, we've changed the course of the world's climate. Yet there is no difference between either side. And whether we have the Conservatives in power, which very much like what the Labor Party is, but if they did get into power, there'd be no difference in their approach to net zero. Are you appalled at Australia's? If you had an intelligence meter at the moment, do you think it'd be moving at all, or just probably stuck on zero?
Yeah. That is a real worry. You'd like to think that our elected representatives would be elected on competence and care for the local population, but that's clearly not what they seem to represent. And are they uninformed? Are they dumb? Is there some soft form of corruption? Do I need to say allegedly because I don't have any specific things to say? But there's also answer number D, which is all of the above. And I'm going to go with D, if that's okay.
You can. It's a big tick there. Andrew, what do you think? Do you think because we need a good opposition to start standing up for Australia and, for example, the farmers. Well, not the farmers, just for Australia. We haven't got a good opposition, have we? As I said, we've got someone who's out of primary school. I looked at her last night. I thought, oh my God, she's just out of grade 6 or something. And then the federal opposition, Angus Taylor and Jane Hume. So, what's your thoughts?
I've been a team sport player, heavily involved as the president of a footy club for a long time, and a recruiter, and I played over 450 games of AFL footy. So the only way we were successful was when the team all came together and worked as one. You need a coach. You need somebody who can manage what's going on, and ultimately the coach in this case is the leader of the party, and they need to have the trust in in that party and the party people in that. Look, there's certainly some great talent. We're really, I feel, perhaps in some cases unfairly targeting the opposition in terms of the leadership, because the leadership comes from within the group, and I think they need to do a camp out together. I don't care where they go, but they need to go out somewhere, the whole team, and try and rebuild themselves, because most of them are natural leaders, and I think they need to work out how they can actually work together. That's number one. The reality is the Australian public's looking for strong policies. We are bereft of having new ideas. Here in Victoria, nobody's got a plan to repay the capital debt. We've got the CFMEU that have clearly taken a lot of money out of Victoria. I think the chap that's done that investigation on them, he's suggesting at least 15 billion. It could be north of 30 billion. But he's definitely confident there's at least 15 billion that's been wasted on what you would say is just ridiculous nature. Here in Victoria, we've been fighting against the emergency services volunteers tax that was being placed on volunteers. And then when you look at this and see the wasteful spending of the Victorian government, they clearly need to be on the bounce out. But in all cases, all these political parties are struggling for finding a leader and actually finding a way to work together as a team. And for some reason like this, there's no question, as what you said earlier, if they can't find the moment now in the game to come through.
We're going well. And finally, Ross, I think Andrew just got on the right truck. Just quickly, in about 30 seconds, we are over time now.
Okay, well, the problem in Victoria is the government's corrupt, and the corrupt government is really taking money from decent, hard-working Victorians and passing it off to criminals. Setka and his other mate, criminal mate, and this is just totally unacceptable. And there's going to be a revolt in rural and regional Victoria and across workers in metropolitan Melbourne. This is just completely unacceptable. We cannot have corrupt governments in Australia. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree. We've lost Andrew. I think I could see him running behind you into the bar. Maybe that was something.
He's probably had enough. The other thing, I guess, Farah is going to be interesting. Susan Ley is retired from Parliament completely, and the question really is, will One Nation take that seat? And I think there's a distinct possibility that is, such as the disgruntled nature of rural and regional Australia. I think that's a possibility, and the Conservative side of politics have to get their act together. They've got to play as a team. They've got to play to win. And this government is just giving them so much ammunition, and the opposition should be absolutely winning the game, and it's not happening.
No, it's not. We're just trying to work out things here. Here we are. Andrew, you're there. We're going to, Cam, if you could bring Andrew back into the forum. First of all, Paul, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Let's see. Well, I joined podcasts on energy wherever I can. So I'll be back around. I'm on. My social media is not really set up. I just join wherever I can. But I'll be around.
And truly, I have no idea what's happening here. But we do have. There we are. That's even better. Ross, Andrew he popped in, he went out again. That's what you get for being in OU. Frank Romano is watching this down the line. He's probably in Paris thinking, what the hell's happened? You've gone now. I'm having a great day here. So what I'm going to say,
you've really hung in there well. There's been a lot of background, and good job keeping your concentration. It's Friday. Cheers.
So thank you so much. And this has been The Protagonists. Thank you to our guest, Andrew and Ross, Andrew Wiedemann and Ross Johns, and Paul for helping us out.
I think the Chinese have cut us off.
Yes. We're going to go now, gentlemen. Go and have a tipple for a Friday night. Because we're finishing now. This has been The Protagonist. We have had some issues, but we did cover some great ground too. And we do understand that the data centres, we understand that these major projects, then they are going to do more damage than good for Australia. The data centres, you've got to ask yourself,
you're in the film there, mate.
We don't know. Okay, that's about it, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. And
good.
We still have noise in the background. I'm just trying to work out how to get rid of them at the moment. And it is The Protagonist.
Well, they're bereft of them, aren't they?
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. Ukraine is reportedly planning to hold simultaneous presidential elections and a referendum on a proposed peace deal in spring of 2026 to legitimize a U.S. brokered settlement with Russia, according to the Financial Times. The U.S. has allegedly made elections a condition for activating security guarantees, though Kyiv disputes aspects of the report. The referendum could address constitutional barriers to ceding Russian-occupied territory. Ukrainian officials maintain elections cannot occur without security guarantees and note constitutional limits during wartime. Challenges include displacement, occupation of territory, banned opposition parties, and organizing overseas voting for refugees. A 13-year-old boy has been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of knife possession following a double stabbing at a London school. Police say the suspect allegedly scaled a wall, sprayed a substance inside a classroom, stabbed a 13-year-old boy, then stabbed a 12-year-old before fleeing. He was later arrested near a mosque in northwest London, which police say appears coincidental. Counterterrorism Policing London is leading the investigation, but has not determined a motive. The victims are no longer in life-threatening condition, and the suspect is due in Westminster Youth Court. UK and EU regulators are seeking answers from X and XAI after reports that the Grok chatbot has been used to generate sexually explicit images, including outputs that appear to depict minors. UK regulator Ofcom said January 5th it had urgent contact with X and XAI to understand what steps they've taken to meet legal duties to protect UK users, and it will assess whether an investigation is warranted. An EU Commission spokesperson said officials are looking very seriously at Grok's spicy mode, calling any childlike sexual content illegal. Malaysia's regulator also announced a January 3rd probe into alleged harmful image manipulation on X. MP Rupert Lowe, who launched an independent inquiry into child rape grooming gangs in England, said evidence suggests countless British girls may have been trafficked to Pakistan as sex slaves. Testimony from survivors indicated abusers, described as mostly Pakistani Muslim men, attempted to take victims abroad and traffic them within the UK. Victims reported rape, torture, threats with weapons, and racial and religious abuse. Lowe called for a government investigation into missing girls in affected areas and alleged widespread institutional failure, accusing police, local authorities, and NHS workers of ignoring or covering up crimes. He said officials who knew and failed to act should face prosecution. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government has approved a bill allowing naval blockades against migrant vessels under specific conditions, including terrorism risks, health emergencies, or exceptional migratory pressure. Ships violating a blockade could face fines up to €50,000 and possible confiscation. The draft legislation, compatible with new EU asylum reforms, permits blockades lasting up to 6 months and expands grounds for expelling convicted foreigners. Meloni said the measures aim to strengthen border security and public safety, emphasizing that migrants must respect Italian law. Border Czar Tom Homan announced in a press conference in Minneapolis a significant federal drawdown is underway after a notable decrease in unlawful agitator activity.
And public safety is at risk. These QRFs respond to help these officers get off the X and get out of that situation. I asked the day when I got here, I want to know what the QRF's call outs are, what their deployments are. I want to know every time a QRF is called out. The QRF deployments have dropped dramatically because we have less of that occurring, less of the agitator that cross that line. That is a good thing. That is a win for everybody, not just for the safety of law enforcement officers. It's a win for this community.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Right now, somewhere in Nigeria, there's a Christian family being persecuted. Those who are not killed are often forced to flee their homes. At Equipping the Persecuted, they're committed to reaching every affected area and help heal the deep physical and emotional wounds that have been inflicted upon them. But they can't help them without your support. So please visit equippingthepersecuted.org and donate today. Sign up for just $35 a month. It's a little over $1 a day, and you'll help rescue Christians who are suffering and provide security, medical care, food, shelter, and love. The situation is urgent, so I'm asking you to join in the next 10 minutes. It's a life of fear and danger for these Christians, but for just over $1 a day, you can change everything. Go online to equippingthepersecuted.org and make a difference in the life of a persecuted Christian. That's www.equippingthepersecuted.org.
Hi, my name's Michelle Tankey and I'm the volunteer manager at the Lost Dogs Home. We've got 145 incredible volunteers that help us with a wide range of activities, including helping out in the laundry, taking dogs for a walk, doing activities with our enrichment program, administration, gardening, you name it, they're helping us around the shelter. Whether it's blowing bubbles to entertain kittens waiting for adoptions or even taking a dog for a walk, it's such an incredible positive impact on the animals. Volunteers are so important and special to this shelter because they support us in caring for thousands of animals each year. The impact they have enables us to do far more for the animals than we would be able to. For example, we can get on top of the huge amount of laundry we have. So the volunteers allow us to clean thousands more blankets than we could. It's incredible the amount of gifts that we're given by the public. We're so grateful for it. So if we get some toys, we can give them directly to puppies straight away to play with. Or towels, we can take them to our vet hospital for them to use immediately. So it's a really important job to help staff with. I would say to someone who's interested in volunteering to please get in touch. We would love to hear from you. We have an application form on our website that you can fill in, so please just detail all your skills and experience you can offer the shelter, and we'll be in touch when a suitable role comes up.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. That was an experience and a half, but I appreciate Andrew, Ross and Paul for joining in on the discussion, which is very serious because, oh, beauty, we're going to build this brand new, big building, computers, the whole lot. How do we make it work? So just wait and see what happens. It's going to be an exciting year. Now, approved by the Israeli cabinet last week in its final draft, when this bill is passed by the Knesset, Israel will have the authority to impose Israeli law in areas of the West Bank that have been under Palestinian control. Now, the bill will affect and involve dozens of Palestinian historical sites in the West Bank. In addition, Israelis will be able to purchase real estate in these areas, which I think is absolutely obscene, paving the way for future Israeli settlement in Palestinian demographic centres. The UN says it is gravely concerned, but we won't do anything over Israeli plans to expand control over the occupied West Bank. Saudi Arabia, Jordan and a number of other regional states have also condemned Israel's move. It is unclear when the new rules will take effect, but they again show Israel can do what it likes and international law simply is meaningless. Dr. Frank Romano is a member of the California and Marseille bars. He represents the Palestinian people before the ICC, is a peace and freedom activist and has organised many demonstrations in Palestine, Israel and the US against the Israeli occupation. He's the author of Love and Terror in the Middle East, and that's the 5th edition. Frank, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, always a pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me with you. This is such a very important issue that we need to discuss today.
Bring us up to speed. What are the facts? Where are we?
Yes, well, let me just start out with personal experience. I was jailed in 2018 in Israel, protesting the potential destruction of a Bedouin village near Jerusalem called Elkanah Akmar. The village was surrounded by settlements, settlers attacking Bedouins on a daily basis, even draining their sewage into the Bedouin village, which was typical a strategy of settlers. But just like the Bedouin village, Hebron was also under the control and subject to daily incursions, attacks, settlers. I lived there also for 2 months. Palestinians, before I lived with the Bedouins, I lived next to the Ibrahim Mosque. The Palestinian mobility even then, and that was in 2018, mobility was even severely restricted then. Many settlers invaded dwellings and took them over, and soldiers required over 1,000 Palestinian shops to close because they were too close to the settlements. Many checkpoints controlled the mobility of Palestinians, and I could, witness that as I was very well restricted in my mobility. And now, as you noted, Mike, there is a plan adopted by the Knesset officially ushering in the legal purchase by Israeli Jews of property. An example, allowing them to take over Hebron almost completely, slowly but surely, and making life even more difficult than before. What are particular these measures? The Israeli government is making it easier then for Israelis to purchase and then seize the land, and attempting to change the laws concerning land registration, and that's key. So, opening up land registration for the first time in the West Bank allows Israeli Jews to know who owns the land. In other words, they will know which Palestinians own the land so that they can pressure and harass them. Now, keep this in consideration, and I don't think it was alluded to yet, Mike, in your introduction, but President Donald Trump has previously voiced opposition to the annexation of occupied West Bank, and this looks like, and we'll talk about this more specifically, a prelude to complete annexation. Now, the world opposition, there have been a lot of opposition to these measures that you've already noted, Mike. I won't go into it, but let's look at the Oslo Accord of 1993. The Oslo Accord divided up the West Bank into three areas: Area A, B, and C. Area A controlled by Palestinians, for civil and security control. Area B is joint Israeli control. The Palestinians would still be in control of the civil and security control, and divided with Israelis. Area C, which is 60% of the West Bank, complete control by Israel. This decision that you announced, Mike, will institutionalize a system of municipal apartheid. It is key to Palestinian cities, removing them from the Palestinian Authority jurisdiction. Now let's look at Hebron specifically. Hebron is in Area B, right? Divided jurisdiction between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. The planning and construction powers have been stripped from the Palestinian municipality and transferred to the Israeli civil administration. It's a separate municipal entity created for Jewish settlers in the heart of the city to manage their affairs independently, bypassing all Palestinian mechanisms that was set up by Oslo. Then we have Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem. This site has been removed from the jurisdiction of the Bethlehem municipality and placed under direct Israeli administration for the maintenance of services. Now, Adel Shadid, an expert on Israeli affairs, has warned that these administrative changes have profound religious and political implications. What does this mean? The Ibrahim Mosque is no longer treated as a Muslim holy site managed by Palestinian Authority. It's management is transferred to a Jewish religious council in Kiryat Arba. Israel has effectively Judaized its identity by law, not by force. Oslo, then, which was already almost totally void before this decision, especially since Israel has refused to return huge chunks of land to Palestinians under Oslo, appears to now be completely gutted. Now, looking at Hebron again, the Abraham Mosque in Hebron is an important symbol for Palestinians, but it's also a site revered by Jews that refer to it as the tomb of the patriarchs. So Hebron is the largest Palestinian city in the West Bank, over 200,000 people, and about 800 settlers have taken over large areas of the downtown city, protected by the Israeli military. And when I was living there in 2018, there were only 400. So the number of settlers have doubled since then. Now, in addition, these new rules that you discussed, Mike, would also set forth that the authority over building permits for illegal Jewish settlements in Hebron and the Ibrahim Mosque would be transferred to the Israeli government from the Palestinian Hebron municipality. This is a way to completely control this religious site. It's also added to increased restrictions to worshippers, settler incursions into Palestinian homes and districts, control over the entry and exit through a myriad of checkpoints, and bans on the call to prayer for the mosque. In addition, if you look the downtown area of Hebron next to the old city, the Israeli soldiers have confiscated, we talked about before, many shops and those shops belonging to the under the Hebron municipality in the old city. The construction of a dozen of illegal settlement units have been ushered in, and the reconfiguration of water pipes by connecting them to Israeli Waters Company network is exasperating an already massive apartheid system. Now, a Jewish settler in 1994 entered the Ibrahim Mosque and killed 29 Palestinians. After that, Israeli authorities divided the site, the mosque, into a Jewish and Muslim prayer areas, and far-right Israeli settlers continued to strengthen their control over the areas of Hebron. Now, the Hebron settlers today can move freely through there, through the old city, through Hebron, but the Palestinians cannot move freely through the areas and are subject to curfews. Some of them, and I visited a Palestinian family, are not even allowed, they don't even leave their homes because they're afraid that the settlers will occupy their homes and not allow the Palestinians back into their homes. And I visited, again, a family that under this restriction, there was a young man who never left his apartment, yet he was young, he could work, couldn't bring in income because he could not leave his apartment, subject to the confiscation by Israeli settlers. The present situation then in Hebron really compromises the Hebron Protocol, which is part of the Oslo Accords, by closing almost all the entrances to the mosque except for one entrance. Now, the director of the Hebron Rehabilitation Committee, his name is Mohammed Jabari, said that the ultimate goal then is to establish a Jewish quarter linking settlements to the Ibrahim Mosque by emptying Palestinian neighborhoods. What does this mean? This whole procedure will screen Palestinians away from the mosque. Well, they have no access to the mosque anymore. This now ushers in, Mike, a new division, a new division, or even a harsher reality than this temporal and spatial division imposed since the 1994 massacre that I talked about. It manifests a clear intention to increase Israeli control over the Hebron's old city. Now, Israel has tried to strengthen its power, attain complete control over Hebron and other cities in the West Bank, and the latest government policies continue that policy, which is exasperated since October 2023. Now, Palestine believes using Hebron divisions is a model for the West Bank, and we'll get to Bethlehem. What's happening in Bethlehem? Palestinians in Bethlehem are getting a taste of what's happening in Hebron. One of the Israeli cabinet decision that we talked about last Sunday stipulated that the Bilal bin Rabah Mosque in Bethlehem, known to Jews as the Rachel's Tomb, will be placed under Israeli administrative power for clearing and maintenance after previously being under the jurisdiction of the Bethlehem municipality, Palestinian administration. Now, in conclusion, Mike, Smoltryk has been saying, along with Netanyahu, we will continue to kill the idea of a Palestinian state. Netanyahu has repeated this. They're both working to undermine Oslo Accords and any type of a two-state solution. These are frothing at the mouth, racist, rabid beasts in power, like the German Nazis in World War II. These are killers, but they're getting away with this. Several Western governments, including France and United Kingdom, have recognized, right, Mike? We talked about this before, the Palestinian state. But they're doing nothing specifically to pressure Israel to stop the atrocities being committed. The argument is condemning Israel is no longer sufficient. It's time for sanctions. The European Union now has to consider suspending trade agreements completely, as well as individual countries. Israel is imposing a reality of greater Israel and apartheid before our eyes, and again getting away with it. In Bethlehem and Hebron and the rest of the West Bank, Palestinians feel powerless to stop what they view as a creeping annexation. Palestinians fear This is a prelude to total annexation, and the official annexation seems imminent. Two-state solution is out. There's no consideration for Palestinian self-determination, and in final conclusion, the future of Palestine, especially for children, is compromised. Peace process? Let's ask ourselves, what peace?
This creep. Actually, I'm going to say this creep. We could be referring to a whole bunch of people, but I mean the creep of the Palestinian land. It's not in any way is it part of the or is it the big beautiful Trump peace deal, the peace board? It would seem that Israel is acting. It's just going to go ahead and do what it wants to do, and all the others can talk amongst themselves and do what they like. At the end of the day, Israel, in their mind, are going to do what they want to do, as you've demonstrated there. How do we write things?
Yeah, Mike, we really, as we've been referring to a lot in past interviews and with the public and so forth, is specific pressure. Now, not just words, needs to be exerted against this Israeli systematic apartheid state that's asphyxiating the Palestinians more and more. And now the board, as you talked about, this so-called Board of Peace is not just about Gaza. Of course, it will, it's going to spread over and probably administer what's happening in the West Bank. So specific policies to pressure Israel. In other words, how can France, in one corner of the mouth, Macron say, oh, we recognize the state of Palestine, we see the people are suffering, and then on the other side of his mouth, ordering more arms to be sent to Israel to enable Israeli control of Gaza and the West Bank and enabling the genocide, obviously, in Gaza, and the further apartheid control by Israel over the West Bank and Gaza. Specific measures against to pressure Israel to stop this. Trump even opposed a great deal. This idea of annexation is saying nothing. I don't think he said anything about these recent measures adopted by the Israeli Knesset that clearly ushers in nonstop and transparent total annexation of the West Bank.
Can Donald Trump do more now? Can he? I don't know if Donald's that interested. He seems to have a very short attention span. There's so many places he has to save, as we know that he wants to win that peace prize. Another one. It could be another one. He'll steal someone's if he has to. But what? And I'm being a bit scurrilous here, Frank. So I apologise, but it is Friday, and I've had a great day so far. Tell me, because we need to write things at the moment. There is no spirit of the agreement at all, as you would say as a lawyer. There is none at all from Israel. But you also mentioned that there needs to be more done instead of just said. And if you look at Australia, for example, they were very much behind what you were saying, and we have to look after the Palestinians, all that stuff. They've done an about turn in Australia. If you look at other countries in the world, they're doing about turns. And obviously it's a pressure from Netanyahu and the Israeli government. How do you get them to go back to where they were? Because they are all, not all, but a great number of them are doing about turns, or worse still, ignoring what's happening, just not caring about what's happening, and moving on to their next task, which who knows what that will be. So how do we get these countries then to go, okay, we need to exert more pressure, and words, people will say it's very true. Words are cheap. They're doing nothing at the moment. So how do we get some sort of semblance of decency about all this?
Yeah, very, very good question, Mike. And what appears to me is, and if we keep this theoretical, if this is just Israel and this is just Gaza, the West Bank has nothing to do with us, people normally that don't identify with the struggle, saying it has nothing to do with me, then have no empathy. Now, I think we need to change the scales here. We need to bring the cows home. We need to bring home the bacon. And how do we do that? Make it relevant to Australians, to Europeans. I live in Europe, and to Americans. Now, how do you make it relevant? Well, first of all, let's get back that you alluded to this, the legal ramification. Repeated UN resolutions have declared that the Israeli occupation is illegal. 2024, the International Court of Justice, for example, ruled that the Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the regime is associated with them are in violation of international law. What we need to do, Mike, one aspect of what we need to do is to say, look, someday this could mean you. In other words, if there is an entity like the Board of Peace taking over the world, ignoring completely international law, attempting to replace the UN in every way, let us say there is a country such as Russia, such as China, or such as the United States that want to take part of your land, that's violating international law, just like Israel is violating international law by the occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. Then since you have completely allowed ignoring international law with respect to Israel and Gaza, what about complying with international law with respect to what could happen to you? In other words, we need to see that if international law is being ignored, and international institutions as well, being taken over almost by this phony dictator, like he's playing with the world, like in that Charlie Chaplin movie, The Great Dictator. This is a serious thing, even though it's a comical type of approach to Hitler, that bringing home the bacon means to Australia or other countries, another country, another region can intrude into their land and take it. And since they, Australians, Americans, and Europeans have allowed international law to be violated, and with respect to Israel and Palestine, then international law at that point will not be applied to them, because it would be hypocritical by saying, look, you do not apply international law to Israel and Palestine, but you need to apply it to us. So we need to see it's what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, and this is the real big conclusion here, is about all of us. And we need to see this as the destruction of our international institution and international balance that can bring in violence, conflict, and war, because there's now only Trump's group now that will be monitoring all this. And you know, Trump is a warmonger. Now this can be very dangerous for the world balance. We need to see this is that what's happening in Israel and Palestine is all about us, and we need to bring home the bacon, Mike, and see that we need to get back to our international institutions and international law. And by doing that, we need to continue pressuring the International Court of Justice to render its decision, which is still pending, with respect to the genocide committed by Israel, and the International Court, the Criminal Court, where I'm involved as representing Palestinians, needs to make that final decision and condemning Israel for war crimes, and not just issuing arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant and others that are not being complied with.
Yeah, I agree. Look, we have run out of time. We need to, and we'll do this every week if you don't mind. We're going to start doing a lot more on the Middle East, because I think not enough is being done. We have that opportunity. We have a chance. We're fingers crossed that we do have an investor. So we will see what happens in the next few weeks. And hopefully we'll be back 24/7 all over again, under a different name, of course. So we need to really step up a bit here, I think, Frank. And I have you down here as being in Paris, but I think you're in Jordan at the moment, if I'm allowed to say that. I've always been fascinated with Jordan, and I've just, I think I love the Middle East. I think there's some the history and it just blows my mind out. And just reading about Jordan, what a great country that is.
Yes, I mean, I'm surrounded by Roman ruins, to give you an idea of history. And what is interesting is I've avoided coming to Jordan, and spent more time in Lebanon, and it was all the issues there and the instability, and then came to Jordan after being in jail by Israel after we got close there with the Samud, the global Samud flotilla. And came to Jordan to improve my Arabic before heading back to Barcelona and be participating in the Samud II movement. And now I'm in Jordan and I see, yes, there's collaboration between the Jordanian government and Israel, but there's a place where a lot of Palestinians have come, are out of war. It's a very balanced area. There's very little crime here. And people, the economy is not so good, but people seem to be in positive spirits here. It's a very positive area, very historical. And for that, and seeing a lot of Palestinians around where I can go and meet and work with Palestinians, because I'm not allowed to go back in Palestine. I've been banned from Palestine and Israel, and Lebanon is clearly unstable. I find it's great to be here, really, and it's an amazing cultural place.
Now, we got a message from the IDF. They said they've got your cell waiting for you. Just come on back. Come on. Look, Frank, we love you, Frank. Thank you so much for your help and your work. If somebody wants to find out more about Dr. Frank Romano, the greatest lawyer in the world, how's that?
But just Frank Romano, 11 Terror 5. Go into my website and just put Frank Romano and maybe Palestine or that Bedouin village Al-Qana Akmar, and be glad to through the book and other ways of speaking with you and sharing with you and spectators of this program, Mike, and we'll keep this going.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Dr. Frank Romano, or just Frank, thank you so much. This is not the Protagonist. This is the world today. It's been one of those days. Let me tell you, the wife has got a scotch for me when I get home. I've earned it.
Our mission at Pets of the Homeless is really simple, and that's to keep vulnerable people and their pets together when they're going through a tough time. Back in 2015, Pets of the Homeless started with a 20-kilo bag of dog food, made it into small packs, put it in a suitcase, and it was just me walking down the streets of Melbourne. One woman on a mission to make a difference. I would share the story on social media.
We've just hit 100,000 meals distributed today.
And the community really responded positively, and it just grew from there.
My name is Kent, and this is Hippo. She's everything to me. She's such a good girl. I got her at a time when I wasn't very stable. I'd come out of prison, I was homeless, but as soon as I got her, I just realized, oh my God, I can't let this dog go. And she's just my best friend. Hippo had a canine equivalent of an ACL injury. I knew there was something really desperately wrong. It was agonising seeing her suffering. My caseworker put me in touch with Pets of the Homeless, and Yvonne said that they could help, and I was just so overjoyed. I wouldn't have been able to get through that medical incident without their help. Like, it just would have been impossible.
That bond between us and our pet is very important, and when someone is going through a really tough time in their life, that bond becomes even more important, and that's what we're trying to protect at Pets of the Homeless.
Who's that? Who's that?
My favorite quote is, I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realized I was somebody. My intention wasn't to actually start a charity. It was to help. It was just putting one foot in front of another, and that's how we got to where we are today. We're now in a warehouse. We have about 150 volunteers. We provide on average about 60 to 70,000 meals every single month. We have a network of about 73 community partner organisations that we work with. We've also taken in hundreds of pets into our foster care program, and we've just reached 2.5 million meals distributed.
In the time that I've been volunteering with Pets of the Homeless, I've seen the community grow, numbers of volunteers, pet food packing, got a brand new van, and we can reach more community pantries and reach more people. The community, whether it's the volunteers who are packing the food, who are foster caring, they've got so much love to give.
I think Pets of the Homeless gives people hope. There can be a bit of judgment for people who are homeless and have a dog, but the reality is those dogs have got love and support, and it's so wonderful that Pets of the Homeless are able to help. It really makes a big difference in actual lives. It's really important work.
To the people who have supported Pets of the Homeless over the last 10 years, thank you from the bottom of my heart. There's so many kind people out there, and I'm just grateful for all of them. The work that we need to do is so huge that the need is growing, and we can't do it without the support of our community.
We're today's news talk, the world today.
I was just telling everybody how I was looking forward to a scotch when I was getting home. I believe the wife drank the entire bottle. No, just joking about that. Friday, I can say those things. Richard, it's a bit early for Richard to have a scotch at this time of the day because he's in the UK, which is about 20 minutes away from 9, but you have something to look forward to. My next guest, Richard Anthony Edward North, or Richard North, is a British author, political researcher and blogger. Now, he's published books on defence and agriculture and was previously the research director in the European Parliament for the former political grouping Europe of Democracies and Diversities, which included the UK Independence Party, UKIP. Now, North has collaborated with the late journalist Christopher Booker on climate change, public health and other issues. He co-wrote a number of books with Christopher Booker during including The Great Deception. Now, I made light before of a scotch, but you actually need it if you could understand what's happening with Rupert Lowe's harrowing, absolutely illuminating rape gang hearings ringing in our ears. The UK government and most of the media, including a lot of independent media, are determined to ignore this national tragedy. It's a crime, it's revulsion on steroids. It's I cannot believe that they are still trying to bury this. I'm going to talk to Richard about how such gangs, how they escape the law. Richard, thanks for joining me.
Hello, Mike. Welcome to the snowy Bradford, on the fringe of the caliphate.
Yeah, but I've had the air conditioner on and it's been freezing in here because I want to feel what you're feeling at the moment.
Well, we're in the throes of this enormous furore about Jim Ratcliffe, who committed the sin of sins of saying that we're being colonised by immigrants. I have to recall that I'm London born and bred, but I've lived in Bradford for the best part of 40 years. The last time I went to a particular supermarket about 2 miles away from my home, I was the only white man in the shop, and I was being trailed by a group of black-clad ladies in burqas, speaking what was probably Urdu, could have been something else, but it certainly wasn't English. The idea that we are not being colonized seems to be unique to the political set in London. They need to come trotting up to Bradford and see what life is really like.
I'm just wondering now if after saying that you might hear on the door
my son got a visit. My son got a visit at about 9 o'clock in the evening by two, as we call them, plods in this country, police gentlemen who arrested him, locked him in a cage and took him off about 20 miles and interrogated him through to midnight for posting a meme which said nasty things about Islam. That is the state of Britain today. Yes, you're quite right. The knock is something we all fear. It's something that is quite possible, and it's something I'm well prepared for.
Tell me about the Kashmiri rape gangs.
Well, the one issue that struck me that has been omitted from public discourse is that, and we've heard a great deal from detractors who try to say, well, white people rape women as well, blah, 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 blah. What distinguishes the Kashmiri, and it is that when you talk about Pakistanis, by far the majority of these are Kashmiri. And what distinguishes the child sexual exploitation by these groups is that they're actually treating it as a business. These children are effectively sex slaves, and they are being groomed, that's the word that's used, for selling out or treating as gifts to associates within particular groups on a very structured fee-paying or gift basis as a business enterprise. And what we're looking at is not just random groups of rapists, but structured, organized groups which are effectively criminal syndicates, not unlike, in fact, extraordinarily similar to the Italian mafiosa who took such a strong part in United States history. And this is not being recognized. We are dealing with organized crime syndicates. The rape is simply one part of a broader enterprise which covers everything or anything from money laundering to tobacco smuggling to retail illicit tobacco to illicit drug dealing, particularly heroin. The kings of the heroin trade in Britain are the Kashmiris. They're close links to the Pashtun in Afghanistan, and time again we see them up in court with heroin seizures. They are involved in fencing for shoplifters. You hear in the UK we've had an explosion of shoplifting. You hear organised gangs doing it, but you find that the fences are very often South Asian. The people who are buying the goods from the shoplifters are South Asian, Indian sometimes Pakistani. And the government is not getting to grips with this. It's not even recognising that we're in a grip of organised crime, of which, as I say, the rape is just one part of it.
Tell me about the law enforcement. Some call them coppers.
We call them plod.
You were so disrespectful. But law enforcement, is that an apparition?
Partly. I mean, when this started, the rape gangs are not new. There's records in local newspapers going back to the early 60s. The big push of Pakistani immigration, Kashmiri immigration, came late 50s, early 60s. And even then, there were reports of organized rape from the Kashmiri community. Now, I have a tiny sliver of sympathy with the police in the very early days. And you can get terribly po-faced about this. But the fact is that child prostitution in the working class in Britain has always been a thing. I mean, the Salvation Army was basically set up to rescue fallen women. And the police initially thought they were dealing with child prostitution. So they dismissed the cases of what we now know is organised rape, but they allowed the phenomenon to continue unchecked. And gradually they got absorbed into it, and they got into it too deep and couldn't change or wouldn't change track. And of course, we then are dealing with an element of corruption. We know now that the police themselves were actually, some of the policemen were actually raping the kids themselves. Other police, Asian police, were actually part of the gangs and were feeding information back into the gangs from the police, so that the police, and particularly with the local authorities themselves, became corrupted, and as a result became part of the problem rather than actually dealing with the enforcement and dealing with the cures.
Just wondering, what's gone? I mean, if you look at the tiers of your society, we have government, the elite, and then you have law enforcement doing what government wants. If you look at Mandelson, former Prince Andrew, look at a whole bunch of others, the names will be coming out soon. Look at your government, the Starmer government, and I'll keep off a lot of the political issues, but the lack of respect issues are quite prominent. What's gone wrong with the society of the UK? Has their moral compass gone? Because this is appalling. When we are talking about each of those issues, by the way, we're talking about the rape of children, but it's not one little, a little bit happened there. It's like this. It's pelting down with, instead of rain, with child crimes, pedophilia. It's just pouring down at the moment, and government and law enforcement. And when I said, "Is it an apparition?" I was actually quite serious about it, because the idea of a copper is to catch the bad people, and they ain't doing that. They're enjoying the fruits of the bad people's labour. So, what's wrong with the British, or what's wrong with the governments and the constabulary and the people that make the UK tick? What's wrong with the people of the UK getting up? We see them marching about this, marching about that. What about marching about the most defenceless group of people, the children, in your country? I don't see that a whole lot.
I have my own personal theories. I don't think we ever got over as a nation being a feudal society. The classic British comment is, well, mustn't complain, must we? We are, generally speaking, overly compliant, placid, easily led, and slow to anger. And we have allowed ourselves to be, as a people, we've allowed ourselves to be abused by a political class which has gradually distanced itself from any idea of democracy and representation of the people, and has become an incubus based in London, which has completely lost touch with society and is now ruling us by diktat and has completely lost the plot. London has become a nation on its own. It does not represent the rest of the country. The people in Parliament no longer represent the rest of the nation. They sit there and dictate to us in profound ignorance. And this is a fascinating thing. The imagination, one thinks of our ruling classes, if you call it that, at the top of an information tree, who are all-knowing and are completely knowledgeable, understanding the issues. But in fact, what you find is there's an inverted information tree. These people are driven in the main by profound ignorance. It is a struggle to understand quite how ignorant the average MP is. And by God, I've researched and worked with enough of them. And you find that they are locked into their mindset, their little doctrines, and they are completely closed to outside influences, so that they develop this extraordinary insouciance, this insulated phenomenon, which no longer bears any resemblance to what anybody else in the country thinks. So we complain, we write blogs, we write posts on X. The storm on X at the moment about Jim Radcliffe, I mean, it's very clear that the bulk of the population has absolutely no time for Starmer. He's one of the most hated prime ministers that we've had in living memory, and probably beyond that. The whole concept of mass immigration is an anathema to the British people. We don't want it. We've never wanted it. We've never asked for it. Every time we've voted for it, we've voted against it, and still they do it. We've had more people in the last 20 years imposed on us than have immigrated to the whole country since 1066, between 1066 and 1997. We're in a situation now where we have more people, something like 12 million people in the last decade imposed on us, and it's not acceptable. But the government and its claque are completely and utterly ignoring us.
Yeah, I totally agree. Even from Rupert Lowe's inquiry, one child was raped 700 plus times.
It's appalling.
The country should stop, and it would have once. It's just, oh, well, that's a terrible story if someone reads it. Legacy media covers it up, so does a lot of independent media, or they try and milk it. This is if it's accepted, if no one's doing anything about this, it shows you that Western civilization in your part of the world is in real trouble.
Well, there you have the BBC spending more time on the Epstein victims than what is probably 250,000 British girls raped by Pakistanis. The media are very, very much part of the problem. And I think essentially they are London-based. I mean, if you look at the BBC, its chairman is an Indian-born who has appointed an HR director who is in fact a Pakistani national who's naturalized. The top of the BBC is utterly compromised. They have gone into diversity big time. Every other reporter these days seems to be an ethnic character. And they have basically sold out the nation to the great God of diversity and will not say anything realistic about the way this country is deteriorated under the groaning under the weight of immigration, which is there for everybody to see but these myopic fools who think they know better than us.
Will it ever right itself? I mean, under Starmer, and it's all part of civilization to poke at the government or the administration, the current administration. But this is way worse. We have the disintegration of your culture, and you still got another 3 odd years to go. And it still doesn't mean that Labor will be replaced, because you've got to have a very good opposition, and there's still a long way to go before Nigel gets to the end of that walking path. So, are you going to get out of it? Will the UK regain its culture?
There's an academic called David Betts from King's College. You may have heard him. I don't know if you've actually interviewed him. But he has been talking very credibly about the UK drifting into civil war. Now, you can define a civil war in many, many ways, but I wholeheartedly agree with his premise. And I think we are sliding slowly, inexorably into a situation where there is no longer a way of voting ourselves out of this mess. And I think Betts thinks within 5 years, I think possibly a little bit longer. But slowly we are seeing the way things are breaking down. The social contract is effectively wrecked. Nobody trusts government. Every part of government seems to be breaking down. Cooperation, social cohesion is breaking down. And anybody with any brains looking forward can only agree with Betts. I don't think there is an easy way out of this. I think we are marching into a very, very bloody, miserable future.
I do too. But you're not alone. And it probably deserves a longer discussion next time. The invitation is open to you. I've enjoyed this immensely, and we've just touched the top of it too, haven't we? We haven't even just skimmed the top of it. So I think we need to discuss more. And tell me about your website and what we can expect on that.
Turbulent times. We ran a website, the EU referendum, which went for nearly 20 years. I'm now in my 21st year of blogging. I now run a site called Turbulent Times. It's turbulenttimes.co.uk. I like to boast, and it is a very vain boast on my part, that I have blogged every day, 24/7 for 21 years. I took 2 days off for open heart surgery, and I took a day off for going to prison. But apart from that, I have an unbroken record. The prison, incidentally, I refused to pay my council tax because I'd had 8 burglaries in my house, and I refused to pay the police precept. Whereupon, for the first time in history, we got 12 policemen in my road to arrest me at midnight and take me off to jail. So this is Britain for you.
Well, you're a villain. I mean, that's fantastic, by the way. I love villains, but you're a good guy, and your work is very good. So the invitation is there. So we should do more of this. And when I'm next in the UK, we should get a bottle of whiskey and just discuss the world.
Yeah, for sure. No single malt.
Anything. Look, Richard, thank you so much for your time too. Richard North there. This has been the World Today. The Protagonist has been a real Friday, but we got through it. Have a great weekend. May, as they used to say on the Two Ronnies, may your God go with you. Thank you so much. Have a good one.